go ahead.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, March 18th, 2021. Commissioners Court is meeting in special open session. This morning we're joined by ASL interpreters Dario Garcia and Selena Salum. Would you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, Caesar. Go ahead.
Good morning, Judge. With your permission, Judge, we'd like to start our agenda today with item number 6.
And the request, it's almost, I think we're going exactly from bottom up.
Okay.
Yes, I think we're going, yeah. So it'll be, which item are you going to take first?
Number 6?
7's okay, Caesar, if you can do 7.
7? Okay. Item number 7, receive an update from County Commissioner David Stout regarding Emergence Health Network and the Central Appraisal District.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Let me unmute here. Morning, Judge and
Morning.
Commissioners. Thank you all very much. I'll start with my update on the Central Appraisal District, the CAD, as you all know. The CAD is the agency that puts together the valuations on properties with residential here in El Paso County. And we actually have a meeting this evening, we're due to receive an update on what the El Paso CAD is doing to prepare for 2021 protests. Ms. Kilgore, who is the executive director at the CAD, said that the CAD's gonna have many protest hearings just as it does every year, but they will make sure that safety precautions are in place. Masks must be worn by everyone who enters the building, and daily spraying of disinfectants is occurring, for example. She said that the only thing that the CAD is letting up on will be to allow more property owners into the building during the protest season than we did last summer, since we were also dealing with this pandemic before. The CAD will be conducting a total reappraisal of all properties and expects a large number of protests, probably between 32,000 and 35,000 of them. So the first batch of notices to property owners about their values is going to be going out on April 5th, so just a couple of weeks away, and then property owners have 30 days to from the date of the notice or until May 15th to file a protest. And in Ms. Kilgore's words, it's going to be a very busy summer, that's for sure. So why so busy? You may have seen in the news reports that indicate the housing market here in El Paso is very strong. Valuation trends are fairly stable, with volatility in the mix of values between different segments, such as residential and commercial. So grocery stores, for example, are doing well. Entertainment and travel and leisure, not so much. So big box stores are doing well, but mom and pop businesses are down. Residential is up, but it's very possible that some commercial property will also be down. So most mom and pops don't own their property, but rent in places like strip malls. So while we saw rental assistance to help maintain the ability to pay commercial landlords, we also may see that those same commercial landlords, unfortunately, are going to be coming back with valuation protests. The Central Appraisal District, as of last month, had 2,133 lawsuits covering about 2,000 parcels that have been filed since 2015. There's 804 of them active. 599 of those are from 2020. with about 1,293 that have been settled thus far. And that's about $5.5 billion in value that's currently under litigation. So that, you know, that's a lot to be dealing with, and you know, we will see what comes of those cases and of the future protests. But wanted to make sure that y'all are aware of what may be coming with the valuations and such. So, and that's all I have for the CAD regarding Emergence Health Network, which you all know is the local mental health authority. I'm going to try to keep it brief because we have a presentation from EHN management that's coming on Monday. They're going to be giving us their annual report. But you know, we heard about the crisis intervention team with the county sheriff's department at our last meeting, and I'm glad to see that project is underway in the county. EHN had to transition to remote services, just like many of us during COVID, and is now working to transition back into in-person services. In the report next week, you'll hear an update on the CCBHC program, which is a Certified Community Behavioral Health Center designation, which is a federal designation for facilities specifically designed to provide a community with an all-inclusive range of substance use and mental health disorder services, especially for individuals who have some of those most complex needs. You'll also hear about the LIDA, Transition Support Team. LIDA refers to Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority, which EHN is here in El Paso County. And those serve as a point of entry for publicly funded intellectual and developmental disability services. And then other areas of the presentation we'll hear on Monday will include the Mental Health Learning Library, community collaborations, transitions to in-person services, as I mentioned, upcoming the data call center that they're working on, more about the Sheriff's CIT pilot, which I hope we can build upon, the partnership that they have with the Region 19 Education Agency, and the 887 National Suicide Hotline. So I appreciate the opportunity to give you all an update, and you know, I'll do my best to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Commissioner,
Go ahead, Commissioner Leon.
Judge, thank you, Commissioners. Good presentation, Commissioner Stout. The only question I've got is on Emergence and their presentation on Monday. Our meetings have been running way too long. And is there any way, unless I missed it someplace, we can get that presentation in advance so it doesn't take that long on Monday to go through every one of those slides?
Good observation, good comments, Commissioner.
Yeah, we can reach out to EHN to see if they'll send it out as soon as possible. I'll have my staff reach out to them momentarily.
Okay, I think that would be a big help. And also, something that might be coming down the pike is I'm going to try to put an agenda item. It might be on executive, insofar as the length of our meetings and our ineffective items and our speaking points sometimes that really drag on. But we can talk about that when and if I'm able to get it on the agenda. But thank you, Commissioner Stott. I appreciate that.
I'll have my staff send that presentation to you, and I don't foresee it taking a long time. Typically, they're very concise. I mean, I don't see it taking more than 20 minutes. Probably, it's going to be pretty quick.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. If there are not any other questions, that's all for me on that item, Judge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Stout. Back to you, Caesar.
Thank you, sir. We'll be going to item number 6, receive a presentation and take appropriate action regarding redistricting advisory committee proposals.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners. Betsy Keller, County Administrator. I just wanted to introduce this item. On February 18th, you heard a proposal from Commissioner Stout. You directed staff to bring back options and more information for a proposed county redistricting advisory committee. The committee, of course, would be responsible for gathering input, proposing new maps for both commissioners and justice of the peace precincts. The county attorney's office has researched and compiled a variety of viable options on how the committee could operate and how citizens could be selected. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our county attorney's office team.
Thank you, Ms.
Judge,
Keller. Good morning. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, before the county attorney speaks, I just could I make just a real quick starting comment?
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to say that before we start, just really how excited I am that we're finally taking this item up, and I think we had a really great conversation on the 18th of February last time we took it up, and I think and hope that we all agree that a citizen-led redistricting commission that develops commissioners and justice of peace maps, the first of its kind in a county in Texas is I think is a great statement on our commitment to community engagement and transparency. So also just want for reference I just want to say I'm looking forward to the presentation and the discussion that's going to follow, and hope that we can move forward to create this policy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stout, and good morning to the court. Good morning, Judge. So I haven't gotten the chance to meet all of you all yet, but it's a privilege to be before you all this morning. I am Anna Schumacher. I'm an assistant county attorney, and with that, if we could please advance to the next slide, please. Thank you, sir. So I won't rehash because Ms. Keller said this very well in terms of where we are today and what we reviewed on the 18th. And so as the court knows, we did review some of the legal questions that had to do with the advisory committee, and we have shared our findings. And so today we're just going to explore additional options for what an advisory committee could look like. I wanted to emphasize that it's explore additional options because I wanted to highlight all of the work that Commissioner Stout has done. He has done a tremendous amount of work, and so what I have found in no way supplants what he has shared. In fact, I will highlight what he shared, but this is just to present additional options for those who have not had the benefit to do that same level of research. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as you all may know, there are basically two federal deadlines with regards to the status of the census data. And as you all know, the status of the census data is that it's still pending. The first deadline is the December 31st, 2020 deadline that we didn't meet. And so that basically is when there's a statewide release with regards to the counts used to apportion congressional seats among states. The more important one for our purposes is that April 1st, 2021 date. And that's a release of the PL 94-171 data that's known as the block data that's used to redraw the districts. So that's what everyone is really waiting for in order to get started. As you also may have recently heard, we were hopeful that it might come out a little bit sooner, potentially this summer, but right now it's looking like it's likely to be closer to that September 30th deadline. It's in terms of when it'll be released to the states. Because of that delayed deadline, what we're looking at is the potential compression of redistricting timelines. It might also be altering the filing deadlines and potentially shift the date of the primaries. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what are the main duties in terms of the commissioner's court and redistricting? So there's obviously a rebalance of the commissioner precincts as well as justice precincts, but there's also a look to the election precincts. The reason that the first two are in a different color is because you have to do steps 1 and 2 before you can get to step 3. And so for that reason, I'm going to focus on steps 1 and 2 with regards to this commission. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is not an end-all be-all model in terms of redistricting steps, but it is a good guide. And I have to give due credit to the Bickerstaff attorneys who suggest a similar model. And so the first step is basically to load all of the statewide data into our GIS software, right? So that's step number 1. After that comes an initial review. And so basically what the Commissioners Court could do is assess basically what is the data that has just been loaded? What do our precincts currently look like? Will every precinct be affected? Are some precincts still okay or need to be adjusted? And so that's that initial review of that data once it's loaded. The next step is to review state and federal law, as well as traditional redistricting criteria. And the reason is that's important is because the next step here is to basically develop a redistricting policy. And so we want to make sure that our policy is in line with those state, federal, and traditional criteria. In the redistricting policy, one of the things that can be very helpful to these redistricting committees is to basically highlight high and low priority redistricting criteria and also highlight what specifically is the committee charged with. So the more direction that we can give to the committee on the front end through that policy, the more effective that committee can be. So this next line is basically what the committee, thank you, would be what the committee would be looking at, right? So what they're looking to do is to correct population imbalances. They're looking to develop a redistricting plan in order to then generate those illustrative maps. And through all of that, they're looking to gain public input. Once all of that is done, then they would recommend a plan to the Commissioners Court, who would then vote on that new plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there are a few operational models. In putting some of these together, I looked at over 20 different jurisdictions, with over half of those being in Texas. Some of the larger county jurisdictions seem to fall in California when I look beyond Texas. But to begin with, I wanted to highlight what Commissioner Stout has proposed. And so in his model, he establishes maps for, the committee will establish maps for county commissioner precincts, county election precincts, and JP precincts to comply with all state and federal law and allow for reasonable equal population with other precincts, to include the Voting Rights Act, and the precincts to be geographically contiguous. So one of the models that I also looked at had to do basically with the committee working to generate maps with the assistance of GIS staff. And so essentially what the committee under Model 1 does is they gather public input regarding county boundaries and considerations for the commissioners and JP precincts. After that, that committee would then work with GIS staff who generates those maps. And then after that, the committee will review the maps that have been put together, garner additional public input, and then it's with that additional feedback, they could then go back to GIS staff to basically adjust some of that map or the mapping boundaries based on the input that they received. And once they have all of that and have a more solidified map, what they would then do is they would vote on what recommendation they're going to make to the Commissioners Court. But not only does the majority vote get to be presented to the Commissioners Court, essentially what you would have the benefit of is the map that was voted on by the minority, meaning it didn't get a majority vote, but it was still a very viable map that ultimately this committee was voting on. That would also come before the Commissioners Court. And in addition to that, they would also receive a report that outlined the rationale for why they were presenting the recommended map, and then also why potentially that second map was not selected. And the benefit in doing that is that you don't then have to go, back to this committee to come back with more than one map or to generate an additional map for the court's consideration. One of the things that I also would like to highlight in this model is that there are some groups and committees that actually train the committee members to use some of this GIS mapping software. But given how complex that is, some people, in speaking to our own expert, Ms. Lisa Weiss, she said some people go and get a degree in this GIS software. And given the limited amount of time that we have, it's probably better to use GIS staff who's already been trained to use that software and basically support the committee. The other thing worth noting is that the cost for individual use for that mapping software is about $4,000 to $6,000 per user, which is why I presented model number 1 as I did. The second model for your consideration is basically it's a consultant model. And so what you could do is you could hire a consultant who proposes, for example, 5 maps for the committee's review. And then that committee could also accept maps from members of the public. The committee then takes all of the maps that are received, elicits public feedback, and then they would go back to the consultant to provide the feedback necessary to basically update a map. At that point, the committee would then have the public input necessary to make a vote on the recommended map selection. And then, like we just described in the previous model, they would then present the Commissioners Court with the map that had the majority votes, but also the map that had the minority number of votes, and again present the rationale that outlines how they reached their recommendation. And so then Model 3 is the most different, but some groups do have this model. And so essentially what it does, it's basically the committee is only garnering feedback from the public, and then it then presents that to the Commissioners Court, who takes the public feedback that was generated by the committee to then draw the maps. What I will tell you is that there is some variation in this Model 3 in some groups, in that they use a legal consultant between this first bullet and the second bullet, in that it's then, the feedback is garnered by the committee, who then presents it to either attorneys or a consultant who generates the maps and then works with the Commissioners Court to develop those maps that they would then ultimately vote on. And then next slide, please. Thank you. So with regards to the selection process, there's also a number of ways to go about it. So to highlight Commissioner Stout's proposal, each member of the court would appoint 2 members. One of the members has to reside in the precinct of the appointing commissioner, and a commissioner could not appoint fellow court members. The other element is that the chair of the Ethics Commission would serve as the ex officio member. With regards to that first model that I found, it's an appointment model. And so through that, essentially, you would have applicants that are interested in being part of the committee submit their applications through the elections office. And the reason that I selected the elections office, it could be any other office, is that they happen to have staff that's currently in the office right now and could receive some of these applications easily. The next step is that each member of the court would appoint 2 members, and then one member would be from their specific precinct, and then another member could be from the public at large. And then finally, the county judge would appoint the chair and the vice chair to that committee. The next model is a little bit more involved, but there are several groups here in Texas that use this neutral official selection model, is that essentially you have a neutral official, and this could be, for example, the head of the Council of Judges, who is charged with creating an applicant review panel. And so they basically take applications for the people that are then going to select the initial 60 applicants. And so once this official garners enough applications, and this can be, for example, 3 people that are going to serve on this panel, they neutrally select those people, and then that panel is the one that selects up to 60 of the most qualified applications that are received for this committee. And so if that number seems high, some groups also use 45 of the most qualified applicants that is basically drawn down by that panel. After that panel selects those 60 most qualified applicants, each member of the court could basically strike 1 applicant from that pool with no questions asked. I will tell you that some of the jurisdictions that have this in place have not elected to use their strikes, but it is available. Then after that step, the neutral official would randomly draw 5 names from the remaining applicants. And so those people are then the 5 first committee members who would then select an additional 5 applicants to vote on those 5 remaining slots. Now, those 5 remaining slots, those people could be interviewed by the first 5 applicants, based on certain qualifications. They could also be randomly drawn. There's basically some room there in terms of how those last 5 remaining slots are selected by those initial 5 applicants. Then finally, the last model is the partisan affiliation model. And so essentially with this model, interested candidates would identify with a specific party or no party would submit an application to the county election official. And so then after that step, it's the election official who divides the candidates into their corresponding party pool. So based on the county party percentage that we have here in El Paso County, the county auditor would draw a corresponding number of candidates from each of those party pools. Now, the reason that this model is perchance not the most relevant model in today's, infrastructure or at the current time, is that more people are starting to not per se identify with one political party in my research. And so that's why this model may not be the most relevant at this current time. Then the next slide, please. Thank you. And then we next go to eligibility. So what Commissioner Stout had proposed is that adults continuously registered to vote in El Paso County, they would have been registered for the 5 years immediately preceding appointment and have voted in 3 or 5 of the immediately preceding elections. He also noted that they cannot have been employed by El Paso County within 5 years of appointment, and that also applies to spouses. Appointees of any state or local government body or individuals who have held any state or local governmental appointment within the past 5 years of appointment to the commission, as well as their spouses, would also be ineligible. Individuals who currently hold public elective office or have held public office in the past 5 years, or their spouses, would also be ineligible. Additionally, individuals who currently hold any office or position within a political party, campaign, political action committee, and/or partisan organization affiliated with a party or candidate for elective office or held such position within 5 years of appointment, or their spouse, would also be ineligible. Currently registered local lobbyists with any local government unit or registered within the past 5 years are also ineligible. The committee members could not have contributed $500 to a political campaign for any commissioner within the past 5 years. And then finally, individuals who are or have been staff consultants to any type of business association with a member of the Commissioner's Court or have one within 3 years of appointment, and that includes their spouse. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things to highlight is that what Commissioner Stout outlined is actually several of the things that most groups have to some degree incorporated in their eligibility requirements. But one of the things to consider is that the more eligibility restrictions that we have, the more limited the pool of applicants essentially becomes, right? And so that's why some groups do choose to limit their basically restrictions, to 1 to 3 restrictions. But some of the most commonly seen basically eligibility requirements that I found here, which also applies to their spouses, is that you've not been a county employee or contractor or board member in the past 3 years. You are, in fact, a county resident. You've registered to vote in the county for the past 3 years. And the reason that it's in the county is because basically that means that you are vested and interested here in our local elections, right? In what's happening on a local scale. You've also voted in the last 3 of 5 local elections. I'm sorry, I just covered that. And then the non-public elected official or campaign staff in the past 3 years. So that's something that would make you ineligible. You also would not be eligible if you have been an officer, employee, or consultant of a political party or lobbyist for the past 3 years. And you've also not made a financial contribution greater than $1,000 to a candidate for county office in the past 3 years. So these are just some of, the considerations, but other things that have come into play is, some groups have potentially disqualified not just spouses of some of the ineligibility criteria, but also that would apply to immediate family members. This same criteria that you all select could also apply to that applicant review panel that we described in that model in a few slides ago. And then additionally, the public official could include officials of municipal, county, state, or federal governments are another consideration. And then, campaign staff, another thought is that could also include volunteers. It just would depend on how restrictive you all want it to be. The way that some groups have chosen to measure whether some of this is at play or not is that they would require affidavits basically from eligible candidates that are attesting that they in fact meet all of the aforementioned qualifications. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the people that are involved in this type of committee basically it is a sacrifice, right? Because it's very involved and it would likely be in a short amount of time that they're doing all of this work. Even our staff has to put in a tremendous amount of time when they're doing their work. And so some of the attributes that I have also found in terms of seeking out candidates are basically that you're able to commit sufficient time to train. and also come to meetings, that you possess experience that demonstrates analytical skills that are relevant to the redistricting process and voting rights, that you possess an ability to comprehend and apply applicable legal requirements. 4, that you possess experience that demonstrates an ability to be impartial. And then finally, that you possess experience that demonstrates an appreciation for the diverse demographics and geography of El Paso. And then the next slide, please. Thank you. And so Commissioner Stout had also, in his proposal, laid out some additional guidelines for what the committee would do. And so some of those are that this committee would hold public meetings once per month until making final recommendation to the Commissioners Court. The other is that the goal is to grant the maximum deference permitted by law, and then not deviate from the recommendations that the Commission makes, absent statement for all reasons of disagreement and the proposal of alternatives in open session of Commissioners Court. One of the things that Commissioner Stout has said, right, is that he basically had come up with this before we knew how delayed we were going to be in some of the release of the census data. And so one of the considerations that I am proposing is that there is an updated time frame for completion that is based on when we have the release of that data. Additionally, there is a need to develop bylaws that would govern how this committee would operate. And there's actually quite a bit of ground that could be covered within those bylaws in terms of how they will operate. And so that would be beneficial for the committee to have. Additionally, and I have to credit Ms. Keller, who actually gave input on this, and it was actually a very good expansion of this, is to accept during open meetings that there would be no direct or indirect communication between committee members and the Commissioners Court, elected officials impacted by the new maps, and that includes incumbents or anyone representing the aforementioned interests. And so this is something that in my reading, and I'm glad that Ms. Keller expanded it, is something that they say that not every group includes this, but really should consider including this, because the whole point of having this committee, right, is for there to be transparency and basically a trust in the process. And so whenever there are these conversations that are not in public, basically, it calls into question the transparency of that committee. Additionally, another point that a lot of groups include and provide is the maintenance of meeting minutes, as well as making translation available, which would particularly be of importance here in El Paso. There are also the suggestion for 4 public meetings. And the reason why I suggest a minimum of 4 public meetings is because there is benefit in providing at least one training meeting where not just the committee members would benefit, but also the public that seeks to be engaged in the process. Additionally, there would be a meeting that basically assesses the current map and then makes proposals to GIS staff. The third is to review the GIS maps that are basically provided and obtain public feedback. And then finally, vote on the map recommendations, which would again involve public comment. Then additionally, the proposed maps should be posted or could be posted online so everyone could see those. But an additional step that the court could choose to do is to also post those in the newspaper prior to the committee's final meeting. And then that way more people could know that if they want to give public comment prior to the committee's vote to make a recommendation, they could certainly do that. And then finally, the committee would submit its recommended map option approved by the majority along with the map supported by the minority to the court. And then the committee would submit their basis for those recommended plans. And then next slide, please. Thank you. So as you all can imagine, there's quite a bit involved with this committee. And so its success is basically based on how well basically word gets out and there's public feedback and input. And so some of the resource considerations to make this as successful as possible include advertising for qualified committee applicants and public meetings. In fact, when Austin adopted their model, they attributed largely the success that they had based on how well it was advertised. The other option or the other consideration is designating staff to aid in posting agendas, meeting minutes, and providing administrative support to committee members and the public. Also, GIS support staff would be needed, as well as the use of election staff to receive applications or neutral official in selecting the applicants. There would also be a need to train newly appointed committee members. There's also usually a need for legal and/or consultant attendance at public meetings to answer legal or technical questions. There's a need sometimes for the retention of an outside legal firm to basically provide as needed support. There's also a need for facilitation of public meetings at various times and locations throughout the county. And so this one was important just because sometimes certain members of the public weren't always able to attend at one particular location or at a specific point in time. But if it's scattered or there's meetings at different times, more people would be able to attend. Additionally, there is a need for IT support for recording and streaming committee meetings and maintaining a website with the committee's reports and recommendations. So this is something that I saw that some groups said were actually deficient and that they wish that their jurisdiction did more of, is to maintain an active website. I will tell you that there are some committee members that are very talented that were maintaining that website themselves, but basically the challenge at hand, right, will be submitting all of this information on a timely basis. And so the recommendation is that IT does support with maintaining such a website. And then additionally, there would be translation and interpretation fees. And then finally, publication cost to print any proposed map in a local newspaper. And so that is the extent of my presentation. So if you all have any questions, I would be happy to try to answer those.
Anna, thank you. That was exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Commissioner Stout, I don't know if this is for Anna or for you, Commissioner, but what are we partnering? The League of Women Voters and others that are very interested in they're doing things along these same lines. Are we incorporating some of what they believe to be what they'd like to see, or how are we going to sort of collaborate with those that are working on the same initiative?
Yeah, so Judge, I mean, we've had lots of contact with folks from the League of Women Voters and Fair Maps, Texas, as well. Those are the organizations that actually urged us to take on this proposal, and so I know that we might. I don't know if there are any folks that are in public comment. I was told that some folks may call in, but I don't know if they. We're expecting it to be earlier along in the meeting, but I just want to thank Anna Ms. Schumacher for and the county attorney's office for going through this and for doing all this research. It's a lot of the same stuff that we looked at as we were doing the research ourselves in our office, and of course the framework that we proposed was our idea of kind of the best way to do things. But I do want to say that I think that while providing context and options, this presentation really supports the core concept of what we're looking to do, which is allowing voters to do as much of the work as possible under state law. And because of that, I think that we should refer to this body as the El Paso County Redistricting Commission. And while ultimately I think that we can argue that it's advisory in nature, but because under state law we still must, we as the court still must make the final decision on the maps. The spirit and intent of this is to give it as much authority as allowed under the state, in my opinion. I like the detail in which this presentation goes into when it comes to the operation and selection process. I think that was really good. I think that we always envisioned those details would be hammered out at some point, and what we were proposing was more of a framework, and this kind of gets down into the weeds a little bit more about those things. And so, I'm glad that we're making this headway on that. And just to I think regarding the 3 levels of redistricting that we are responsible for, it was clear that we probably can't do the election precincts for logistical reasons this time around. However, I think that we should consider maintaining the Redistricting Commission's activity through at least 2023, when it can review election precincts at with a less truncated process than we have this year. When we met with Ms. Wise, she pointed out that the elections department makes a great effort not to move polling places and disrupt longtime voters' practices, which is good. But in the end, some polling places do end up getting moved, and we have established countywide voting, right, with the voting centers that we put in place. And so if you look at, a quick glance at the precinct maps, shows precinct lines splitting some neighborhoods, for example, and taking a good look at those would potentially yield better precincts, I think, but also really be valuable to help engage the public and educate the public even more deeply on these types of things. So I wanted to mention that, if we go to slide 6 on the operational models, I think that either model 1 or model 2 would be fine when it comes to refining the details. When it comes to the operational details of the commission, those models fit within the framework that we were talking about within our proposal. The framework talks about the creation of the commission, and this this talks about how it would function. So I think that model 1 or 2 would meet the spirit of the citizen-led goals that we're proposing. I think that model 3 would get the purpose of the framework, but again, the idea for us is that the commission be created with the highest level of deference possible to its members when it comes to drawing the maps. And then regarding the selection slide, the selection process within the framework of our February 18th presentation was the model by which we would select members of the commission. And here we have other options, one of which would create an even more unbiased or nonpartisan participation going further to take the politics out of things, with the second option there, and one of which, with the neutral official selection option. Of course, with either of those, I guess we would have to, either the first two, we would have to either ask our elections department or our auditor if they'd be willing to collaborate with us to do those things, as well as the I guess the Council of Judges, which is proposed to be the organization that would be doing some of the work in the second in the neutral official selection model. And if not, we might be able to look for either an outside auditor or another neutral party if we can't get support from those folks. It may cost a bit more to do it that way, but I mean, I think that it would be worthwhile if we try to go that route. The reason we proposed what we propose is we thought it would be kind of the least complex and it would have a lesser impact financially on the county if the Commissioners Court did it. Of course, I understand that we want to make sure that things are as independent as possible. So either way, I think is the second option there is a great option. And regarding the eligibility, we propose really strict eligibility standards. And I know that there were some issues that some of my colleagues had on it regarding that. But, again, we just want to see the least amount of partisan politics, within this process. And if we look at the benchmark eligibility options, it looks like, best practices in other areas pretty much fall in line with what we put forth in the stringent eligibility requirements that we proposed. So I don't know if there's any questions for me or for the staff, or I'm not sure if folks are actually on the line for public comment, but
real
those
quick,
are my initial thoughts.
I'd like to engage Commissioner Holguin, if you don't mind, because of your background. I sure would like to sort of give us a bit of insight as to maybe some of the experiences and situations that you've dealt with, and that's your insights, Commissioner Holguin.
Thank you, Judge. No, I think, first of all, Anna, this is great. This was so helpful to really give us options like this. I think that's definitely the best way to approach this, because it is something that's very complex, and there's a lot of moving parts that we have to take into account. It's extremely important. I mean, I think that everyone agrees without a doubt, right? Gerrymandering doesn't have any place in our redistricting, and so we want to make the process as transparent as possible. So thank you for this. This was very, very helpful. I guess I'll go through the different slides, just like Commissioner Stout just did. So starting with the operational models. So definitely, I agree that the commission's focus should be on the county commissioner precincts and the JP precincts, right? The boundaries of those. Knowing how detailed and in-depth the redrawing of the precincts, the individual election precincts is, I would still go with our election administrators, Lisa Wise's recommendation that really staff be able to do those, because those have to be done every single election. And I know that they really do, Lisa does really try to make sure that she's not splitting up neighborhoods or moving polling locations to make it difficult. I mean, she's very, very cognizant of those types of issues. And so I do believe the commission, really the more important focus should be on the outer boundaries of the commissioners' precincts and the JP precincts, because the election precincts are just, there's just so much that goes into those. I mean, I've seen firsthand the work that she has to do to make sure every election that those are done properly. And she's so familiar with all of the requirements. I just think that that's her particular area of expertise. As the three models, the three operational models, and I think this is page 6. I agree with Commissioner Stout. Model 1 and Model 2, I think, are the best options. I like Model 2, except that my question would be about the consultant. If this would be like a paid consultant, someone we would hire from outside, or by consultant, do we mean maybe could our elections administrator be that person? Obviously, she has the best knowledge of, the precincts and the election laws and everything that we're talking about that would go into figuring out, how to make the best maps possible. So I had a question about that, because I feel like having the elections administrator working closely with the committee is really, I mean, that would be ideal. That's because she would bring the subject matter expertise into it, and then, but of course, relying on the recommendations and public input that the committee would bring. So that was my question about that. And then on the selection process, I actually like Commissioner Stout's first recommendation about the appointment. I think that it is really important for the committee to be made up of appointees from the Commissioners Court, particularly ones that live in the various precincts. I would actually like both of each commissioner's appointees to be from the precinct. That's something that I've strive to do in all of my appointments. So all of my appointments are residents of my precinct. So, but I could certainly live with just one member being from the precinct and then the other one being at large. Regarding the appointment of the chair and the vice chair, I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe that should be left up to the committee itself, to let the committee itself decide and elect a chair and vice chair. I think that that's how it happens in a lot of our other committees. And so I just feel that that's probably, I think that's a good practice. The neutral official selection, that seems very, I think would be very burdensome on our staff. I think that and we have to remember that they're already going to be in such a time crunch. Our deadlines are already so compressed. I think last time during the presentation, we heard stories of our staff literally almost having to work 24 hours a day those last few weeks to try to get all of this done. I just feel like that would be a huge additional burden on our staff as opposed to everything else. I think Commissioner Stout's right. The appointment process is more, cost effective. I think it's less time consuming and burdensome. So I like the appointment part of it. On eligibility, I still have the same concerns that I had last time during the last presentation. I think we are disqualifying a lot of very qualified people to serve on this committee, on this commission. And it's for the same reasons that I gave last time. I mean, I think by disqualifying, for example, precinct chairs from the two political parties would be disqualified under these proposals. And I think these are the folks that actually have the most interest in these issues, have the most knowledge of these issues, have a lot of times already worked within the election system, have worked as election judges, are very familiar with the neighborhoods. Like I mentioned last time, I mean, I would certainly be disqualified, even if I weren't a county commissioner. Whereas I feel like the knowledge that I would be able to bring to this commission would actually be a good thing. So I'm still very worried about a lot of the eligibility. I think Anna said it right. I mean, the more criteria, the more restrictions that we place, we're just lowering the pool of eligible people. And we all know how difficult it is to find good people who want to serve the county. Something like this is going to be very time intensive. And I'm afraid we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot if we're making it so difficult for someone to be able to serve on this commission that we're not going to end up finding anyone who, one, is eligible based on our own eligibility criteria, but two, is willing to and able to commit to the time and effort that it's going to take to participate. So I don't want us to shoot ourselves in the foot by making it difficult to find people who would actually be really, really, really good at serving on this commission. The benchmarked eligibility options, I think Anna said that it's usually good to have about 3 of these, again, because we don't want to make it so restrictive that it becomes almost impossible to fill the commission, because obviously that would go against the entire purpose. Definitely the county resident, definitely the registered to vote in the county for the past 3 years. I certainly feel that any restrictions on, people having previously held public office or being an officer or an employee of a political party or being a lobbyist, I certainly think that 3 years is more reasonable than the 5. Again, we don't want to restrict it so much that it just becomes impossible to find people to fill the commission. Again, I still have my prior concerns about limiting people who previously were involved with a political party and not letting them serve. But I do think if we are going to do something like that, the 3 years is more reasonable than the 5. The financial contribution, I think that's a good thing to restrict eligibility for service on the commission. I think Commissioner Stout's was 500, whereas this one that Anna has in her slide is 1,000. I think either of those amounts are fine. And then I guess just my last thought is, again, take into account the very, very compressed guidelines that we're, or deadlines that we're going to be up against. That for me continues to be the most stressful part of this whole thing. I certainly think citizen input is tremendously important and should be a part of every level of government. But I just feel like we have to keep that in mind, just the deadlines that we're going to be up against, and really the work that causes for our staff, who are going to be doing, just tremendous amounts of work and spending tremendous amounts of time trying to make sure that this gets done. So I just think we need to be cognizant of that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you. And the only thing, Judge, sorry to interrupt, is that Lisa Weiss, who unfortunately could not be here today because she's traveling. But one of the things that she mentioned to me, Commissioner Olguin, was that her concern in her office and department's involvement in terms of, because that was initial thought too, is that it would be much cheaper if her office could basically assist in some of that processing. And she said that she didn't want there to appear to be a conflict of interest in terms of what her staff was doing, and in terms of her also guiding the committee, but that was her only concern. And I don't want to speak, for her, but she did raise that to me when I spoke with her.
Okay, and I Well, I mean, I don't see how it would be a conflict. I mean, her ultimate priority is to do what's best for the county. And I know I feel perfectly confident in her ability to do that. She's certainly never showed us that she would do anything else. So I'm not too worried about that aspect of it. I think she knows how important it is to be impartial and unbiased and completely transparent. And she has so much experience dealing with these specific issues. I trust that she would do what's best for the county.
Yeah, I think the only comment I have, well, one, obviously, I too believe that we shouldn't limit anyone. I mean, you've got, especially if you're going as much as 5 years, there might be someone that hasn't been engaged as someone who's been 2-3 years, they might still be involved in. But the other one, I really have a tremendous amount of respect for Lisa and what she does and her team. The only thing that I worry from the optics is that sometimes they sort of attack unnecessarily. They attack the elections thinking that they're a problem, that they did the wrong thing, so we might have a group of individuals that would look at it from, that it's not objective. I mean, us internally, we love what she does. We know what she does, the hard work we're just impressed. But there is a group of people that feel like when something goes wrong, it's her. And so I don't know if by having her inside that group that they might interpret that as, a little bit of bias in that process. So that's the only thing. Like I said, it's not warranted, but I do get a lot of individuals coming to me saying, Lisa this, as if Lisa herself, not the way it's set up. And so those are the two comments. I agree. Thank you for that insight, Commissioner. That's a lot of background and firsthand information that I think is going to be very valuable. And I still, I do insist that the partnership, the League of Women Voters, that the ones that are very engaged, that they do contribute and see our proposal and then give us feedback, because they've been at it. I've had them here since day one in my office. They've been here talking to me about this potential situation after the census, so they're very engaged. I just want to make sure that they feel that we're listening to them, that we're taking into consideration what they're trying to accomplish. So, and I'm sure that's going to happen. I just want to make sure that I reinforce that focus.
And I guess, Judge, that's one of the reasons that I feel like we shouldn't be too overly. We need to be careful not to be too overly restrictive of who we exclude from being able to serve, because we don't want to keep people out who would be wonderful to serve on this commission. I mean, I know a lot of individuals in the league, even though the league is a nonpartisan organization, a lot of its members do participate in so many other things, including campaigns. And so we don't want to exclude people like that. In a sense, I almost feel like we're punishing them for having been engaged.
Oh, so engaged. Yeah. That's a good point. No, I feel very strong about that. I just, and you still have the right when you choose them to make sure that you vet it out properly and that you're comfortable with that person. So yeah, the restriction to me, I think it's almost like counterintuitive, like we're trying to do something very transparent, but then we're trying to create some limitations. To me, that's a little delicate to have too many. I can understand the reasonable, rational ones, but the 5 year out, I just have a difficult time as well.
Judge?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Leon, please.
Okay, thank you, Judge. And first of all, Commissioner Stout, that I know you put in a lot of work, and you can see by the results the amount of time you put into this. So it's greatly appreciated by myself, and I'm sure the rest of the court. And Anna, what a great presentation that you just gave us. I really appreciate the directness and you covered everything. So I'm very impressed, and I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Holguin said, and I agree with her. We don't want to penalize a lot of our really active people in our community that are engaged. They do provide donations to certain individuals, and I can think of about 2 people that provided funding to prior opponents of mine that are really good. So, we really, to me, we really need to rethink the $500, the $1,000 contribution, because there's people that make a $50 contribution that stings them just as much as the 500 would to other people. And I agree, we cannot make it so restrictive that we cut out some of the great people that are out there. And I agree with Judge Samaniego that by including Lisa, who is tremendous, I think we would put her in a position where she would be criticized one way or the other with providing so much needed input that's critical. And I agree. I think I think it was option 1, where commissioners make those recommendations. And I agree with Commissioner Holguin. I think both of those appointees should be from our precinct. I think it's very important. My buddy, I'm sorry, my 6-year-old is going someplace. I just, I see as we get closer and closer, narrowing the circle, that I know because of the time crunch, we've got to make some quick decisions. But I think the work, what I see here is you've done a lot of the footwork, and I think we just need to go back and just fine tune it a little bit, so we just get rid of the bugs. And I'm concerned also about it being possible even number of committee members, and I think somebody else brought it up a couple of weeks ago. They might be stuck during some sort of voting, that we make it where if they're stuck, even vote, that somebody can break that tie if it stays even. So that's my input. I appreciate what all of you have done, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Judge, this is Miguel. Just want to make you aware we do have 5 persons waiting for public comment.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we can start at this point. Thank you.
I think Commissioner Robinson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Robinson. Go ahead.
Well, Judge, I try not to be repetitive of what's been said, but as far as what I agree or disagree is sometimes immaterial. But the fact is that some things I agree with, some things I disagree. But the most thing I totally disagree with is and I agree with for the most part what Commissioner Holguin has presented today. As we talked about it at our previous meetings, as far as some of the restrictions, some of the restrictions that are presented today seem to be very punitive, and we should make it where we want to include people and encourage people to participate in our election process in a democratic manner, regardless of what your political affiliation is, whether it be Democrat or Republican or whatever. But the thing is, we want to be inclusive in the total process, and whereby people use the term transparent. But be inclusive in all manners that we can. So I disagree with the fact that we are trying to penalize those individuals by putting some of the restrictions as far as time limit and residing in the district or the precinct. As far as the appointees are concerned, I agree with that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
So, Judge, you want to hear from the folks that are on public comment?
Yeah, that would be. Go ahead, Miguel.
Yes, Judge.
And please let them know the guidelines on time limits. Thank you.
Good morning, speakers. We'd like to just inform you that there's a 5-minute time limit. You are being timed. Mr. Mendez, we can go ahead and get started.
First person that we have is Ms. Marilyn Guida.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
Hello, Judge and Commissioners. This is Marilyn Guida. I live in Central El Paso, 79930. I want to thank all of you, Commissioners and Judge and Anna Schumacher, for that presentation, which was, so I have to say, I'm not I'm not a lawyer, and I really am a novice at trying to understand redistricting and on all of these details. But the one thing I wanted to say first of all is that Ms. Schumacher mentioned how important it is to have choose the term advertising, to let the public know that their input is wanted and needed, and to do the most we can in that area. So the last time I testified, or I commented on this topic, I brought up the funding, and I was thinking about the funding for publicity, even though, of course, there's a zillion other needs for funding to make this happen. But we just need to know so that a large number of citizens know these meetings are scheduled, they have adequate time to arrange their schedule to attend meetings, that they can have input in a variety of ways. We just need as many options as possible for public input. This is, you all recognize how critical this is, and getting the public involved just then sets the tone for them to pay attention throughout the process, throughout every year of what's happening at the government level. There were several things when I looked at the slides last night that I was confused about, and for example, a simple word like correct population imbalances or phrase, I don't know whether that means simply geography or if that means all the different characteristics of a population. It sounds like it really means more the different characteristics that have to be addressed when looking at the precinct boundaries. But I hope it goes in that direction. And then yes, I mean the model issues were so complex that I do tend to prefer something that goes from what Commissioner Stout came up with and includes aspects of models 1 and 2, but I can't really tell you, any more specific about that. But in regard to the minutes, I have seen minutes of government here in El Paso that just state who spoke and give no content as to what was said. And this is, it's worse than not useful. It's just ridiculous. There should be recordings, and particularly of this whole redistricting commission procedures and processes. There should be transcripts of the recordings of the discussions so that the commissioners and the public can have access, can see what was said. There should be no secrets here. There should be no need for closed sessions of this commission. Those are my main points. Thank you very much for giving me some time today.
Well, thank you for your time and energy on this, and thank you for being so engaged. Thank you, Marilyn. Go ahead, Miguel.
Judge, the next person we have is Mr. Jesus Valdez.
Go ahead, Jesus. You're on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Judge, for the opportunity to provide public comment on this very important redistricting commission. My name is Jesus Valdez. I have been a resident of El Paso for 46 years. I am a proud graduate of El Paso High School and Stanford University. In recent years, and on behalf of the League of Women's Voters, which was mentioned in this session, I have delivered presentations about redistricting and gerrymandering to multiple organizations. In fact, in February 2019, I spoke before this body in support of your resolution back then regarding independent redistricting commission for Texas. Furthermore, I have testified before the House and Senate redistricting committees and have taken various trainings on the use of different mapping softwares. In today's political climate, all types of voter suppression tactics are being used, and some are even codified in state law to disenfranchise voters. No tactic, absolutely no tactic, is more powerful and more subtle than the practice of gerrymandering. I understand that the thought of an independent commission drawing maps for the court's up or down vote may seem intrusive to your duties and perhaps even contrary to your self-interest. Today, I am asking you to put aside those feelings and support the critical proposal because it is the best tool to strengthen our democracy and to eliminate gerrymandering. In addition, based on the comments I heard today, in terms of the eligibility of participants, there's a assumption that there will not be an adequate pool of candidates that are not eliminated by the restrictive issues proposed by Commissioner Stout. I'm not sure that that's true. I think there's enough engaged people in this process that will have similar, if not more, knowledge and participation in the redistricting process. That is my testimony. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us.
Okay, the next person we have is Mr. Paul de la Peña.
Go ahead, Paul.
Good morning, Judge Samaniego, commissioners and staff. Thank you so much for your leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic. We appreciate your resilience and courage leading the citizens of El Paso County and following the science. So I wanted to thank you all for that. With regard to today's redistricting commission, this process is critically important for the future of El Paso metro region, the state, and nation. In 2006, I led a collaborative group of citizens as the executive director of the Voter Education Project. We created a consortium in cooperation with this court, the El Paso Commissioners Court, the city of El Paso, and over 30 civic, nonpartisan NGOs, church organizations. During that time, we held town halls, education forums. We had a 5K race, a bike race. We raised awareness and education for the voters of El Paso County for the upcoming 2006 and 2008 presidential election. The result was registering over 50,000 voters, increasing voter turnout by 17%, and raising the El Paso County to a national standard in terms of voting. Since then, we've tried to move toward transparency in government elections and create a paper trail for ballot machines. Only recently has this effort been realized. We're still working on this process. El Paso County has continued to lead in this through the elections office, offering drive-up and drop boxes during the 2020 election to the credit of Lisa Wise and her team, and working in a collaborative way with the county. They are all to be commended for their efforts. In the past, I served as a volunteer, assistant judge, at various polling sites across the county. I've also served with the Commerce Department in the last decennial census. At this point, we are seeking that the court establish an independent redistricting commission under the direction of the El Paso County. Since the data locally and nationally show that there has been demographic shifts where citizens do not choose a political party, it makes sense that the county voting system also reflect the voting patterns in the county. It's important to note that we are looking for citizens who vote in the county, thereby not allowing any carpetbaggers or outsiders who would want to manipulate the IRC in any way. So to Commissioner Stout's point, that's very important that we have that standard. I strongly support an IRC for El Paso County, which will offer transparency and continue to build trust in local government in El Paso County. By moving to an independent redistricting commission, El Paso County will continue to lead the 254 counties in the state of Texas at a time when the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 is under attack. We need to ensure for every Texan and every El Pasoan for generations to come, affording every citizen equal access under federal law and allowing El Pasoans to vote for their representatives in the neighborhoods, in the barrios where they live. Texas will gain 3 congressional seats this year, and El Paso can lead through the creation of the IRC. I want to thank you for hearing my testimony, and I also echo the concerns we have about the restrictions I've heard from this morning in terms of the county leadership. If we can work out those details, I believe, as Jesus just mentioned, that there are plenty of qualified folks in our community to not underestimate the citizens of El Paso County, but give them a voice at the table. And we remind the Commissioners Court that you will have the oversight working with the Elections Commission to make sure that we end gerrymandering and we have fair maps here in El Paso County and throughout the state of Texas. So thank you so much for hearing my testimony, and thank you for your continued leadership defending our democracy. Gracias.
Mr. De La Peña, thank you so much for your time and insights. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Next person.
Go ahead, Miguel.
Yes, Judge. The next person we have is Ms. Stephanie Swanson.
Ready? Go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We
Okay,
sure
great.
can. Thank
Hi,
you.
I'm Stephanie Swanson. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Texas. Thank you guys so much for entertaining me today. I serve on our state board. I'm also a leader in the Fair Maps Texas Coalition. I lead the League's advocacy efforts both at the local, state, and national levels. So I just wanted to state the League's position on redistricting. First, I wanted to thank the county for your efforts to create an independent redistricting commission. It's truly commendable. We really do support independent redistricting commissions at all levels of government. So the League of Women Voters of Texas believes the responsibility for redistricting preferably should be vested in an independent redistricting commission with members that reflect the diversity of the unit of government, including citizens at large, representatives of public interest groups, and members of minority groups. Regardless of whether or not an independent commission is in place, we believe that every redistricting process should include the following: specific timelines for the steps leading to a redistricting plan, full disclosure throughout the process and public hearings on the plan proposed for adoption, a provision that any redistricting plan should be adopted by the redistricting authority with more than a simple majority vote. The standards or criteria on which the redistricting plan is based and on which any redistricting plan should be judged must contain the following: it must be enforceable in court, requires substantially equal population for the districts. The district should have geographic contiguity, effective representation of racial and linguistic minorities. The criteria should also provide for the preservation and protection of communities of interest, respect political boundaries, and be compact as much as possible. That being said, I have some few talking points that I wanted to mention about the proposal. First of all, the League actually strongly disagrees with the county attorney's proposal to create a task force that would recommend the criteria for the redistricting process for the county. We've seen this go sideways, specifically in Fort Worth. In 2011, the task force was created by Fort Worth City Council, and the criteria that task force created actually potentially could have violated the Voting Rights Act. And so one thing to keep in mind when you create commissions like this is that it really does have to be defined everything from start to finish very clearly, because there is a lot of potential for things to go wrong. And the League has monitored a lot of these commissions across the U.S., and we work with a lot of voting rights attorneys who happen to be involved in a lot of this litigation. So we do have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge of where the potential pitfalls could be. And so one of those, as I was mentioning yesterday to Commissioner Stout's office, was the potential for the criteria to not be defined clearly enough. And that is what we saw happen in Fort Worth, as I mentioned earlier. So we actually do not support the creation of a task force at all. We would prefer to see an independent commission in place. I also wanted to mention that there should be money put aside for outreach. I believe that has been mentioned before. This outreach is to provide not only a robust recruitment process for the commissioner applicant process, but also for the public input hearings. I live here in Austin, and so I know for the Austin Independent Redistricting Commission, there was a lot of excitement about people getting involved in the process. so I'm hoping that the same thing would happen in El Paso, especially if you advertise it to the right groups. Here in Austin, groups were shut out. We didn't even have single-member districts here in Austin. So finally, with the creation of the Independent Redistricting Commission and single-member districts, people finally felt included in the process. They were empowered, and they really wanted to, they felt like they had a voice finally, right? So it was a success. And so I feel confident that El Pasoans would be involved in the process as well. I did also mention to Commissioner Stout's office that there is a few timelines for the census that I think you guys already talked about in this presentation. You might want to consider that in the resolution that you've proposed. You might want to extend that out a bit as much as possible to comply with the election filing deadline. And this is just to give the Commission enough time to draw the maps. And then I would also suggest, if this resolution does go forward, that you start the commissioner selection process right away. So when the census data comes out, the commission can be in place and ready to go. I also echo what someone else had said earlier, that all sessions should be open, and if possible, maps should be drawn in front of the community. But definitely all mapping sessions and all sessions should be recorded and open to the public. And then I would actually recommend not reducing the criteria. The criteria for the selection process for the commissioners. The one thing that I might change would be to increase the amount of political donations that they could make to a political candidate or party. I know for our state level legislation, that limit is $2,000 and not $500. But the reason that this is called an independent commission is the way that the commissioners, that serve on the commission are actually selected. And so that list of criteria that you guys have is really what makes it truly an independent commission. So I would suggest not changing that. And I think that is all that I had to say. So thank you so much.
We do have a time limit, so if you could please just wrap up, because we do want to be fair to everybody. So if you could wrap up quickly. And
no, I'm done. That was it. So that's all I had to say, and I just wanted to say thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, and what a great, from an outside point of view, that's really helpful and a great benchmark. So thank you for taking the time to look into our situation. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, Judge.
Go ahead, Miguel.
Finally, we have Miss Judy Ackerman.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Commissioner Stout for bringing this topic forward. Thank you to the judge and all the commissioners and the staff for working on an independent redistricting commission. I am just thrilled that our El Paso City County Commissioners Court is working towards independent redistricting commission. You're setting the example for all of Texas counties, and it makes me proud to live in El Paso. Just a comment about the mapping software. There is free mapping software available and free training available. And that's ongoing several times a week, and any of you could learn how to use this software. I'll go ahead and send the links for the software and the training to Commissioner Stout so that he'll have them if anybody wants them. I encourage you to try it. It's pretty easy. And I encourage all of the commissioners and the judge to continue to support an independent redistricting commission. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you, Judy, for your insight, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Go ahead.
That is,
Miguel, I think
those were all the public comments we had.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, it looks like our process has begun. There was some incredible feedback from the community and some incredible individuals that participated in giving them our insights. So it looks like we started the process of trying to understand from a lot of different individuals. And I think the message has been, get as many people involved and that we feel comfortable. I think that's always been something that we've pushed as a commissioner's court, that we've pushed for that, get as much feedback and make sure we understand that that it's being enhanced and that people are supporting our direction that we're taking. So back to you, Commissioner Stout.
let me unmute here. Again, I really want to thank Ms. Schumacher. Thank you so much for putting all of this together. I know it was in a short period of time, and you did a lot of work on this, and so thank you and your colleagues in the county attorney's office. And I also want to thank Commissioner Leon, for working with me on this prior and for all the feedback that you provided through the process, and of course Commissioner Holguin for your comments. I can really tell that you delved into this and are taking this everybody is taking this very, very seriously, and so I think that's it's great to have this feedback. It's great to be able to work together to try to put forth the best policy that we can, and so I mean it's been a great process up to this point, and that's because of the willingness and the amenability of everybody to actually do this, right? I mean, I'm very happy that we. Hold on one second. My child is passing with my dog, barking at him or growling at him. So I don't know if there are any further comments. One thing that I really heard, Judge, from public comment and the League of Women Voters, right, who has been really involved in this process within our office since the beginning, is we want to make sure that this commission is really independent, and so I'm not sure if any of their comments have swayed anybody, any of the other members of the court, when it comes to looking at excluding partisan actors. But I think one of the points that was made is very, very important to take into account, is that there are lots of people that are very involved and very engaged in this community that may not necessarily be partisan, and so I think that we would have a large pool of folks that would be willing to participate, even if we didn't include folks that are acting in a partisan manner or working for any political party, and so I feel like we could do that. For me, I believe when it comes to the presentation, I would like, of course, to keep with our on page 6, the operational models. Our proposal says to establish the maps for commissioner precincts and county election precincts and JP precincts. I'm willing to especially right now, make sure that it's clear that we're not, that the redistricting commission at this point in time for this redistricting session wouldn't be involved in the county election precincts, just because of the timeline and the logistics, which Ms. Wise has told us would make things more difficult for the process with those. But I do think that maybe in the future, because those maps are redrawn every 2 years, I think that it would be good for the commission to continue to work with the elections department and with the commissioner's court to help redraw those maps in the future when we're not in such a time crunch. And I think conversations that I had with Ms. Wise, it seemed to me, and it's too bad that she's not here, but I felt like we got the indication that she was not against that. And then when it comes to the models, I think either one would be fine. I think we would probably either way be hiring a consultant, an attorney, as we have in past years. So maybe model 2 is something that we could do. That way we don't have to deeply involve Lisa because of the issues that were brought up, and and some of the concerns that were brought up when it comes to actually presenting the maps for review. So I would say Model 2 would probably be better, and the consultant could be that consultant that we typically have hired in the past. And then when it comes to the selection process, I'd like if folks would be amenable to, we can, I think, keep with the proposal that we put forth and that our office put forth last month, where each member of the court would appoint 2 members. And I don't have a problem with if you all want to make it the change that Commissioner Olguin proposed when it came to the making sure that both the 2 members of at least of the commissioners live in the precinct, and then the judge, of course, would be able to appoint people countywide. I'm fine with that. So I would propose that we could do that. And then just going down to the eligibility requirements, I'm willing to. I think that would be fine going down to 3 years instead of 5 when it comes to the limitations on prior, I guess, campaign contributions and not being an elected office or campaign staff, as proposed there in the benchmarking benchmarked eligibility options. But I think that it would be important to and as well as the 5-year employee restriction that we have up there. I guess basically anything that has 5 years going down to 3 when it comes to the restrictions, whether it's the employee restriction or the appointee to government body restriction, or the elective office restriction, as well as the political party and campaign and political action committee restriction. So, and let's see what else. And I think other than that, like I think that's probably the best way to go about things. So I'll make a motion to approve that. I think that also within the motion, we'd like to make sure that it's clear that we have a flexible time frame, because of the dates that are kind of in flux when it comes to turning in the numbers and those things. So I think we need to have a flexible time frame, but I still think that we need to have at least one meeting per month in each of the commissioners' precincts, and that we grant maximum deference to this commission as permitted by law. I think that we should direct staff to work with us to develop the bylaws that would be based upon the creation of the policy as we're looking at it today. I agree with the county attorney with the consideration to make sure that there is not any direct or indirect communication between committee members and the court or elected officials that are impacted by the new maps. I think that should be included. I do think that we should maintain meeting minutes, very thorough and well transcribed meeting minutes. I think we should make the translation available as well at those meetings. And I do think that we need to have our staff create a budget for making sure that the public is aware of the meetings themselves, as well as the maps that are going to be presented to the Commissioners Court, that they're posted online and in newspapers, as suggested by the county attorney's office here prior to the final meeting. and I also agree with with the last bullet point. I think that's fine on the additional considerations where we would have the committee submit the recommended map as well as the minority map, just so that the court can see those two things, and everything else that is laid out within the policy that we put forth. I think is that clear? I guess, I mean, there's a lot of details to what else needs clarity.
It's a long motion.
Commissioner, just I'd like to make a comment because we've had a lot of feedback here today, and I'm concerned that making a motion that sort of so vague and we don't know what incorporated, what feedback are we getting. I would feel much more comfortable if Anna were to put it together, and from what we heard and some of the changes and some of the because I think at this point it has to become a commissioner's court, kind of, as much as you've done and put everything together. We now have to act as a commissioner's court, not to support a specific plan, but also to incorporate a lot of the discussion that we've had. So I don't know what the motion would be, so I'm concerned that the motion would be taking in a lot of information additional to what was presented, but really not understanding it and having it in front of us to really, support it right, that we didn't sort of just move forward. But maybe we didn't come to a full agreement on some of the items as a commissioner's court. So what would the motion be so that I could understand?
Well,
Judge
Commissioner Robinson, go ahead.
I don't know if anybody else wants to comment real quick, but
Commissioner Robinson.
Judge, you took the words out of my mouth. There's no way at this point in time today that I would vote on the motion, as you indicated, being very vague. I want to see what I'm voting for, so it needs to be very specific. So we need to have the changes that are going to be made to the presentation made today need to be refined and put in writing where it's very clear and concise. Otherwise, I'm not going to vote on anything today in that regard.
Anna, with that, I think Anna, do you see what I'm saying? Because there's been so many things that have been discussed. I just want to make sure which ones are the ones we incorporated, which ones are the ones that we're still not sure about. And so then, if you were, my impression would be, and if that's the pleasure of the court, that you sort of bring it back quickly to us to say, okay, these are the things that we discussed and were, put in front of us, because that's a lot of discussion. And I want to make sure if I vote that which one am I voting for? What did we really decide? And which are the items that we still need to cover and vet out a little bit. So I'm not sure. Does that make sense to you, Anna? From what you're having to accomplish?
Yes, thank you, Judge. And I think our county attorney was about to chime in, so I'll defer to her.
Okay,
Good morning,
thank you.
Judge. Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. I think you're exactly right. We're hearing a lot of different ideas from different members of the court. It would be most helpful if it was one motion giving us general direction and asking Betsy or whoever gets assigned this task administratively to come back with all the details. And so if we could get a consensus that on the model that you prefer, I think we heard from Commissioner Stout on what his preference is on a lot of specific details, but we don't have a consensus on a lot of the specific details. So first, if there could be a motion on the model and a consensus that the majority of the court wants to proceed, then we could try to put together some details, maybe even come back before the end of this meeting to lay out those details in a way that we think we've heard from you all in a separate motion operationally. Would that work?
Is there a time concern by putting it on Monday's court? Because to me, I think there's a lot of information and things that we need to look at that for you to come back, I still think we should go through it, understand it, and make sure that when we move forward as a commissioner's court. We're all very comfortable but I'm not sure we could, from what I'm sensing, I don't know if we could accomplish that on a one-day kind of focus, Joanne, but I do agree that we'd love to, I personally would like to give direction to sort of capture what we've discussed and then bring it in a little more streamlined, and then I think we could go forward a lot better.
Right. I think that's absolutely workable. We've been communicating with Betsy about administratively where this project would go. If not under Lisa Wise, then where? And so Betsy, if it's okay with you, we could just do the general motion and then try to figure out over the next few days where all the detail goes.
Right, and just so the court's aware, the same concerns you discussed about it going under elections will occur wherever it goes.
Okay, Betsy, explain that. Let me sure I understand what you're saying.
So some of the concerns about the criticisms about where it's housed or who helps work with it will happen. So, for example, if we were to put it under one of our departments, the criticism is going to be that it's in a department that's under the control of the county administrator, that's under the control of Commissioners Court. Those same types of criticisms can happen unless we decide to hire an independent person to just those are. So if you're leaning away from elections, you might want to consider that as well. But on what Joanne was saying, we can either work on some of these, but it might help for us just to know if we pull back up Anna's slides on the model and the selection to make sure there is a consensus on which ones of those. We've heard some feedback on the criteria, the eligibility. But Commissioner Stout, when you were speaking, I didn't hear any indication about reducing the amount of the campaign contributions. So that's something else we'd want some consensus from you all on before we bring back policy, for example. Is that, Joanne, like what we're thinking, if we could get specific motions on each one of these?
Right. So we're right. It's kind of confusing because we're combining the policy decision for the court that yes, you want to go forward, and yes, generally this is a model, and then we're combining that with a lot of real detail, and there is a lot of detail to be presented. And I think, for example, what Betsy said, I thought what I heard was a consensus that most of you would like to eliminate any ban on participation that is involved with any amount of campaign contribution or any political involvement, which is, I thought, what I heard from two of you. But so that's a big one of the eligibility. We could come back to those and then ultimately things about like how often they have to meet. I mean, is that a policy consideration, or is that something you're going to leave for the commission that you're giving deference to? I mean, we can tell them that that's what you suggest, that it be one in every precinct, those kinds of things. But it does get into, it has to at least be separate motions, or you can just defer to have a policy come back and you all consider the policy. But there's many things contained in Commissioner Stout's very comprehensive motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was just going to say, I mean, I don't have a problem with I guess breaking it down and going item by item, but I think that that's the best way to provide direction to our staff on how to do it, because I feel that I mean that's why I made the motion, because I felt that there are certain things that I wanted to be on the record for moving for and voting for, and so I guess I can rescind my motion if we're gonna be if y'all would like to go item by item on over the things that I listed, if because maybe folks have, I guess, different ideas about things than I do, and that's fine.
I don't know if there was
I would rather have make those motions and make it very clear to staff exactly where the court wants to go.
Commissioner Stout, I don't think the motion was made because we didn't know what the motion was, but I'm not, that's why I jumped in to make sure before we made the motion that we understood what we were talking about. But so was there a motion actually made or that we have to rescind?
As far as I'm concerned, I made a motion, Judge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure because I hadn't heard the.
And that's fine. I'll rescind it. Like I said, I'll rescind it if that's what the court wants to do is go line item by line item, because I mean I think we have the opportunity to do it today unless people want more time to go over what the attorneys presented. That's fine. But I do feel like before we move forward, I think that our staff needs to have direct motions to make sure that they understand what the court wants. That's fine with me.
Let me get some feedback. I know I've heard from Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Leon, what are your thoughts on moving forward?
I think so. I think for the most part, it's a great presentation. I think that maybe we make, as our county attorney advised, make a broad motion. Then whether we come back next week or a special meeting to bring out those finer points, I think that's the easiest way, in my opinion, rather than to go item by item. That you've heard our concerns, and if you can put them into writing, and one more time, I think we can really tweak it really well and be done with it.
I think we'd get to a really close, where we could take a vote once we understand what's actually we're voting on. And Commissioner Holguin, what are your thoughts?
I agree, Judge. I feel like Ana gave us a really good foundation for the different options and what we want to do, but I don't feel that we're at that point where we can already start actually voting on specific things just because there was so much information and so much input that we gave. So from my perspective, I don't think we're ready to make a motion. I feel like really we just need to give staff direction, and I think that they know now based on all of our comments and all of our feedback. I mean, I think they understand the direction that we're asking them to go into. So I agree with Commissioner Leon. I think we're not quite yet at that point. But I think staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like staff kind of understands based on all the input and the comments that they've heard, kind of the direction we want to go to. And we're still very much at that point where we're trying to narrow our different options.
Mm-hmm. I agree on that.
Okay, then I'll rescind the motion, and I guess can we just direct staff to develop the policy for approval on Monday's meeting, or do we think we need more time?
I'm not sure if that's enough time for staff based on all of the comments that we gave. I don't know, but we'll leave that up to staff.
I think Miss Anna is saying that she can have it ready for Monday. So let's put it on for Monday and do our best to get it done with the understanding that we'll do our very best.
Well, thank you for that. And Anna, have you been here 2 years or 2 months? Because you've done, you're the epitome of hit the road running. My goodness, I'm very impressed at all the support that you've done and given us. So thank you so much. I think, do we need a consensus or do we need a motion to move forward?
You just need a consensus. So the direction would be to put this on for Monday, based on the comments and the feedbacks that we heard here today. Erica.
Oh, thank you, Christine.
Judge, it seems to me that the majority of I guess if there is any contention, it has to do with the partisan actors being involved and such. And so I think it should be pretty easy to. Yeah. It seemed to me that all of the other things that were brought up, I didn't hear much concern about those. So
yeah, I think we're going to be at a place where we feel like we understand what was discussed and then what variations, and so Yana, if we'd like to move, then give you that direction to sort of streamline it a little bit, and I hope also that our public, because they've made such an effort today, that they understand that this is so important that we as Commissioners Court move with everyone really feeling good about everything we've discussed, and that we move jointly. And I think that's going to show a lot of strength in our community, that we were able to vet some of these differences. So and take the public comments into consideration as well. Okay, thank you, Anna. Appreciate all your work.
Excuse me, Judge. One of the things that we don't have clear direction on, and we can talk to Betsy some more about this for Monday, are the costs associated. And now that we have an idea of what you all want, the majority of you want, where this is going to go administratively, we'll need to talk to Lisa Wise to see whether she's willing to take this on under like her umbrella. And if not, Lisa, Betsy, where this might go. I mean, we think that there's going to be quite a bit, maybe a short period of time, but quite a bit of administrative support that's going to be needed to support the commission for it to be effective. So we'd like to maybe try to cost those out. And Betsy, I don't know, we can have a recommendation on where this would go Monday. In order for it to really be successful, I mean, we need to give that commission the administrative, legal, and IT support that it needs to be successful. So Betsy, could we do that for Monday? Yes.
That's excellent observation, because if we choose one, we better know what we're talking about cost-wise, right? So I think that's going to be an additional reason why Monday, I think we're going to be at a much better place. So thank you for that insight, Joanne.
Judge?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Robinson?
One other comment in regards to who's going to be responsible for it. I have confidence in our election, Lisa Weiss, and our election office to handle this matter, as opposed to going out and hiring a consultant.
Okay, thank you for your feedback, Commissioner. Thank you. And of course, Betsy, you would look at it like, what are some of the pros and cons of going in that direction, and maybe you could help us out a little bit for Monday. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Caesar, back to you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Feedback on it.
Okay, so we'll take no further action on item number 6. Item number 5, receive a presentation from County Administration regarding 3 lots on Alameda that were recently donated to the county by the District Attorney's Office. Further discuss staff's recommendations for the site and provide input regarding moving forward with the purposing and development of the location.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. Joel Bishop with County Administration. I'm here to present an item for you that's very unique, with a lot of potential for the court and could be very impactful. But so the purpose of the presentation this morning will be to provide the court with information on the site, give the court an opportunity to ask questions and discuss the site, and provide direction for the staff. Next slide, please. Okay, so the site we're talking about is on Alameda. It's 3 lots, 1.67 acres in total. There's various buildings that are old on the site, likely condemnable. I've been out there several times myself, as perhaps some of you have, and I don't think they're salvageable, but we do have a further analysis on that coming. And there is property still there that may have a value between $10,000 and $50,000, depending on how that works out in an auction, if the court chooses to move forward with that way. Next slide, please. This is the site location here, and there's 3 different addresses, as you see, totaling that 1.67 acres, and you can see there's an entrance that abuts a community there. There are homeowners associations there affiliated with that community in the back, and you'll see that there's kind of a gateway to that community there on the street in between. Next slide, please. So this site was known for illicit victimization of women and children. The naked harem was there on the larger site. The owners were convicted of various crimes on the site, and the office was or the site was seized by the district attorney's office in 2014 after about 10 years of litigation. And so it was most recently donated to the county by the district attorney Jaime Esparza in November 2020. And I really wanted to recognize the work that Jaime Esparza put into this site over the years, and his staff, Ballard Shapley and others, put a lot of effort, and the county judge in the last few years has put a lot of time and energy into making sure this opportunity was teed up properly for the county. The county attorneys, Eric Morales and Diana Sharir, recently put a tremendous amount of effort into this site as well. So we're very, very, right now we have a big opportunities because of a lot of hard work that was done, especially toward the end of last year when it all came together. Next slide, please. So the site, one of the unique things about this site is that because it was seized and donated to the county, Chapter 59 in the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure sets unique boundaries for the site. So the site has to be used by law for mental health, drug, or rehabilitation services as a primary purpose, or services for victims, and I think we could say or services for victims or witnesses of criminal offenses or instances of abuse, or the provision of training and education related to the first two. So I think one of the things that's going to be a challenge is these are the boundaries created, and some of the legal questions that will come up are, if this is the primary purposes, can there be other things developed around this? Could this be a site that helps the homeless? Could there be drug rehabilitation? How can the community be engaged in this? And so these are questions that are all going to have to be addressed in the future. Next slide, please. So we have a plan for your consideration today, and really there's many steps to this plan because there's a lot of complexity surrounding the potential development here. One would be to go ahead with a county-led auction on the site so we can square up all the property and perhaps have any proceeds donated to the use of the site that come from that auction. Conduct a brownfield assessment of the site, which Jose Landeros has already initiated in his part on that, and he is here, by the way, to answer questions. If the court has questions on the assessment, the actual physical assessment of the site, Jose is on the line to comment about that, provide you more information, and answer your questions there. And then potentially conduct a demolition of the existing buildings, engage the Paso del Norte Foundation in leading a collaborative to operationally purpose the site within the restrictions I described at your direction. So this would include the potential of engaging that community that is there and having them provide feedback and some sort of an advisory committee to the use of the site, and making sure that the community is heavily engaged and able to provide feedback for how this site is used in the future. And also to engage in collaborative funding opportunities to develop the site, so that there may be a lot of potential there to engage private entities in helping fund the site. There also may be new opportunities around the CARES Act fund and the mental health coming out of COVID, that we may be able to tap some of the CARES funds for that. So there's all kinds of things and opportunities that we need to evaluate. And then again, we would bring back recommendations to the court for consideration after much more analysis has been done. And that's basically it. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the initial presentation, but I wanted to keep to tee this up for further questions and discussion. Maybe I'm sure the judge has comments and would be willing to engage the court in the discussion around your visioning for it. And then you could provide us with hopefully some sort of consensus for moving forward with the site. And again, I would mention Jose Landeros is on the line talking about the physical use, the assessment of the physical condition and use of the site with that brownfield assessment, if you have questions for him. With that, Judge, I'll turn it back over to you and to the court for any questions and comments.
Thank you. Just briefly, just a little bit of history. Jaime did an amazing job of, we worked together from the very beginning, knowing that this was it was going to be a very difficult situation. As always, our legal team, Joel, they got involved, and it belonged to the city as well as to the county, and you can imagine, we thought we were going to have a little bit of a tug of war as to who would end up with it. I think they had a little bit more of an opportunity than we did, but the negotiations with Jaime were extremely valuable. And so Jaime and I spoke about, this concept of, if we could, he wanted to make sure that it would be done in a proper way. They could have sold a property, and, the way they typically would do something is, regain money so that they could use for law enforcement. And but we were able to get there, and thanks to Eric and everybody from legal, just amazing what they had to go through. But I think the concepts that I would feel very comfortable about, and I'll keep them general so that, because I want the feedback from Commissioners Court, but I think the veterans, mental health, and homeless. I mean, that combination of the three, we have a great opportunity to somehow work on these three different categories and be very, very, very successful on how this works. The initial discussions I had was with the author of the 100-Story Home, Kathy Izard, who is actually from El Paso, and her dad worked for Cam Smith, and had a tremendous amount of history here, and left and had some extreme successful. I mean, she was able to get over $10 million for some of her projects. And so one of the things that we've talked about, and not only in this particular, but that we become conceptually, like I said, this is open for your discussions, but the private-public partnerships is extremely important. You saw, like, for example, with the Healing Garden, that, a large amount of the work and money and donations have come from private ownerships, and it really makes that relationship between the public and the private very interesting. We need more of that in El Paso, and I think we now have another opportunity to engage, private companies and so forth to help us through this process. I know I've had discussions with Marathon and VJ. They're very close by. They do a lot on community. That's one of the other conceptions that I really want to make sure that we do, because that was Kathy's focus, was make sure that the community really engages and understands what's going on, and that they somehow feel that they've gained too as a community, whether it's increasing their property value, a portion of it is for community, like they can have community center there that they can integrate some of what they need to do, because she gave an example that she was trying to put a homeless place for a home for homeless, and it used to be a junkyard. And so she said, "Whoops! It's a done deal. They've got a junkyard here. Therefore, what problem would I ever have for doing homeless? Going to be much better." And she had a tremendous opposition because of the stigma. Can you imagine? I mean, that's how difficult it is when we talk about what the homeless go through, is that they preferred that particular neighborhood, a junkyard, than having a homeless home there. And so it was very an eye-opening for her. And so she's always said, get private behind it, make sure that they support it, because that makes it a lot more vibrant. And then secondly, make sure that the community feels that they're engaged and they understand what's going to take place. And so I think those are the so conceptually, that's what I would like for all of you to look at. What is it that I think we have a great opportunity? I think it's a great opportunity to do something like very unique and very specific to what we want. And Joel and I have talked about, where's that gap that sometimes we can't reach? We got all these programs, but there's this gap for the homeless that we just can't seem to get there because the funding is different or it's targeted in a different way. So we have an opportunity to do something specifically that would be extremely good for El Paso or for the region and the county. And also, I think we could lead with other communities. I know that we've been one of the partners at the beginning, and we decided it was difficult to have one partner. It still has to go to bid, was Endeavors. Endeavors actually did a rendering that was extremely valuable to us that shows this multi-purpose kind of focus and different support groups and agencies that would be part of this complex. But then after we got ahead a little bit, we knew that we couldn't sort of have one partner without actually going in for a bid and trying to do it the proper way. They were extremely professional, and they will be part of, once we understand what we want, they might be just as interested in participating, but more in a general sense through a bidding process and making it go through purchasing. The auction, I always thought, having gone there several times, that maybe it would give us a little bit of seed money once again, try to do as much as we can before we go into any, another burden on our taxpayers. And so we don't know how much is there, but it would be a way to sort of have a little bit of money to do some of the initial things that we have to do before we get into the actual, understanding of what's going to be there. So I'm hoping that sort of puts it in perspective. I know Jaime would be extremely proud that we do something that really, one of the things he wanted was, let's not do something that you're going to have to get rid of, 5 years from now, or didn't work, or, that it doesn't become transformative in our community. And so that was his, since he worked so hard at it, I'm respecting something very transformational, something having to do with veterans, homeless, and mental health. So I think it's right along what we like to see. It's not like we're asking for any limitations. So, and as you saw, there are some in the code, right, that keeps us sort of those boundaries going in the right direction. So I bring it up to any discussion, whatever you feel. We're at this point now that I think it could be a great Commissioners Court initiative that I think will stand for a long time and show the county's participation in these three areas. Comments from anyone? Commissioner Leon, I believe, yeah?
Yes, just real quick, Joel, and I think we touched on it when we spoke, but as we move forward, insofar as it being a brownfield, I know there's many, many grants out there that are available to redo brownfields, and it would really help the county. I don't know if the time frame would match up with what we're trying to do, but I think there's a lot of financial help out there for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stout.
Thanks, Judge. Just a couple of comments. Just first of all, Joel, thanks for all the work on the project. I know that while it's been really a long road, and to get to this point, it's really just the beginning. And thanks to you, Judge, for spearheading this transfer of the property and getting this into our hands so that we have something to do with it. I just wanted to comment that I'm sure that the residents of the nearby neighborhoods are glad that the previous business is no longer operating in that area. But I do want to make sure that we and I don't know if this was discussed a little bit. I actually got cut off. My son unplugged our internet for about 5 or 7 minutes, and so as Joel was doing the presentation, I was not able to hear everything, but we've gone over it, and so I just wanted to say that we need to make sure that what we do with the property fits obviously the legal purpose, but it also benefits and enhances the neighborhood, right? I think that we've learned some very important lessons with the placing of the Opportunity Center in the Washington Delta in the Valverde area, and we heard loud and clear from folks there about some of the issues that they saw, and so I just want to make sure that we're very transparent with the neighborhood, but also that again if we look at making sure that it's something that benefits and enhances the neighborhood. I know that Joel, my staff, has discussed some ideas with you, such as offering classes that can be a benefit to the community generally, as well as clients specifically. And as you all know, I'm a very strong proponent of the local food system, and one of the purposes of the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, of course. And perhaps there's something like a community garden that could fit into this project. Offering a range of life skills development while producing healthy, fresh food that can be shared with the neighborhood. However, while these ideas sound good from here, ultimately, I think it's going to be the neighborhood residents with whom we really need to work to turn this, really once blight on their quality of life to something that's a boon to their quality of life. And so I'm really looking forward to working with all of you on this, and of course the community on the next steps. And that's all. I think that's all I wanted to comment right now. Thanks, Judge, for your leadership on this initiative.
Thank you. One of the benchmarks that has been exceptional, I've been very close to Marathon. As you can see, they have a really they're in a situation where they better engage with communities, and they do all the right things. And so I've been talking to VJ. They're very close by as well, so he's got interest and see how it all fits into him. But I've been to some of their committee advisory, and boy, I'd like to benchmark a little bit, because they've got the police department, they've got mental health, they've got, I think I've been there once where they had like 25, 30 individuals in one room, residents, and everyone talking about what's the best thing that they could do. And so you're right, Commissioner, we need to really engage the community, and along with Kathy Iser that said the same thing, that if they don't want it, then it becomes difficult for whoever's there and how they're going to feel about it. And so we will, and Joel and I have talked about this, community engagement is going to be extremely valuable and important. So commissioners, anyone else, any comments? I think today's more of a general understanding that now know it's I'm bringing it now to the court kind of without all the other things that didn't make sense for anybody to get involved other than Eric and what he had to go through in his legal team. And but Joel, what is your expectation at this time from us?
Well, on that last slide with the several points of consideration, maybe just a consensus that you're okay with me pressing forward with this kind of a plan, knowing that Commissioner Stout, to your comments, and Judge, number 4, I think is going to be really important as far as engaging the community there, potentially having Paso del Norte hire a consultant or be that consultant to engage some sort of advisory committee with the community that helps with the development or the purpose development of that site within those Chapter 59 guidelines. So if you're okay with me pressing forward with this as consensus, we could continue to bring back updates to the court within this framework that's laid out here.
Excellent. Can Jose, are you still on the call?
Yes, Judge.
Jose, the one that I think we can talk a little bit about, at least because it's out there and it seems simple, but that demolition part. Are there any concerns from environmental or anything that you feel would really be a long delay or anything, or expense-wise or anything? That's the only one that sort of, to me, is an unknown at this point. But any feedback, Jose, on that particular item?
Yeah, thank you, Judge. Jose Landeros, Director of Planning and Development. The answer to the question is we don't know. And so part of the brownfield site assessment will actually give us an indication of what risks may be on the site that we currently don't know. With the buildings being so old and the uses of some of the other pieces of land being related to automotive and mechanical work of those vehicles, there are definitely some environmental hazards that are on site. And so the brownfield site assessment that we are going to be moving forward with would actually indicate what those risks might be. And then we would have to figure out how to plan around them as we begin site assessment, as we begin demolition of that. The DMD, in partnership with the county and the city, received a countywide brownfield preliminary assessment grant. And we've been working on identifying sites throughout the county, as far west as Vinton, as far into the lower valley as San Elizario. This site is prime for an assessment, and we've submitted the information. We're pending the legal review for the right of entry to actually allow the consultants to enter the property to do that assessment. And then that is the first step in identifying if there are any funds for remediation. So in terms of planning, we're moving forward in a very, all these processes are happening concurrently, which allow us to make sure that we plan accordingly. So we don't have an answer to that question just yet, but we anticipate that as this process moves forward, we'll know what we're facing and what some of the challenges we'll have to overcome in terms of demolition and remediation of the site will be.
And I encourage that be expedited, because I think so many things hinge on that. How difficult that process is going to be, and then that way we know how to engage partners and bring the private, as I said, and I'll do my best to bring private, money into this to make sure, that we have this support. I mean, it's still going to be considered by the court as to how much they want, or do they want private, is just a suggestion at this time. But I think that knowing that variable, Jose, is going to be really important. So whatever, I would encourage that it's looked on, expedited a little bit, just so we know what we're getting into.
Yes, sir. Once we actually have that assessment of what is on the site, we'll also be able to move pretty quickly with remediation. Fernie Hernandez, our Director of Infrastructure Services, has on-call environmental engineering services available. So once we know what is on site, whether it's mold, whether it's asbestos, whether it's other environmental hazards associated with petroleum, all of those hazards we can come up with a remediation plan for the site and move forward with demolition pretty quickly as well. And so we stand ready to move forward. Excellent. Once we actually have a thorough understanding of what is on site and what our next steps should be.
Excellent. Well, Joel, how do you feel? You have the right direction so that you can move forward?
Yes, thank you, Judge, and thanks, Jose, for your motivation and jumping in and helping with this. And Norma Rivera Palacios has also done some work getting some estimates for demolition as well. And we don't have funding assigned specifically to that yet, but we will be working on that for your consideration as well. It could cost between somewhere $200,000 to $300,000, depending on the actual needs when it comes to doing that demolition. So whatever's assessed there. So we will bring that back for your consideration as well. But thank you, Judge, and I appreciate the feedback and direction. We will move this forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioners. Betsy, thank you for all your support as well, and your team. Thank you. Cesar?
Thank you, sir. Item number 4. Receive a presentation from the county's financial advisor regarding current market conditions, the county's long-term debt portfolio, and the municipal bond overview.
Judge, before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce the court to our new Assistant Director for Budget and Finance, Jessica Garza. She's here today. We actually gave Wally a day off, so much deserved day off. So I'd like to turn it over to Jessica. We're so thankful to have her on our county family team, and she's going to lead us on the presentation today.
Oh, Jessica, well, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today, and we really appreciate having a new member in our family. So thank you, Jessica.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, Judge and Commissioners, and thank you, Betsy, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be before you today. Today's presentation is an update regarding the county's long-term debt portfolio. The presentation will also provide the court with a comprehensive overview of the municipal bond process and procedures, as well as some county bond capacity and project examples. This is in preparation for any major projects that the county may want to issue debt to complete, such as stormwater, utility, or major jail improvement projects, or any other project not covered by grant funds. Our office works closely with the Bond Council and our financial advisors on the planned financing for these types of projects, as well as the impacts it may have on both the tax rate and the budget of the county. As noted, today's item is a presentation and is not requesting any action to be taken at this point. With that, I'd like to introduce our financial advisors, Mr. Brad Angst and Mr. Dan Mahoney with Stifel.
Good morning. Thank you, Jessica, and good to be with you, Judge and Commissioners. This is Brad Angst with Stifel. With me, I have my colleague, Dan Mahoney. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, I have a presentation I'm going to go through today. It's been a few years since we did a little bit more of a deeper dive into the mechanics behind the tools available to you, the bonding capacity, what really El Paso County has at their disposal in order to, like the title of the cover page says here, to build counties and renew your infrastructure. So our primary goals with you are to help not only maintain a steady tax rate on the debt capacity and the financing of your projects, but also to consider and evaluate multiple plans of finance, to evaluate ways to save money on financings, whether it be through a refinancing or bond refunding, and then, of course, work to keep you all abreast of the market conditions, which we do on a quarterly basis. So there will be a bit of the market update today, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the mechanics behind it, and I want to show and point out some of the bonding capacity and tax rate levels that we've been working on and that you have at this current time, but also historically. So thanks for giving me some time. If we could go to the slide on page 4. Thank you. Just quickly, if you recall, we used to go by the name of George K. Bauman Company. Last fall, a company by the name of Stifel that we all work with now bought and acquired George K. Bauman Company, and our full Texas practice. And so this has been a good addition for our team, for our resources when it comes to the county, and just wanted to point that out and remind the court of that here briefly. If we go to the next slide, please. Great. So Stifel is really the market leader when it comes to municipal bond financing. We're in the market more than any other firm, as you can see there in the bottom left table, for the last 7+ years now. Stifel's been out there in the market selling bonds, working with municipal issuers across the country on more transactions than any other. And I point that out more to let you know the resources that we bring. Not only is there our direct team that works with you quarterly and even more frequently with staff, but we have additional partners across the country that include former rating analysts, so the credit rating agencies that now work with us. We have specialists that focus on development districts and financing those. So you may get proposals for PIDs or public improvement district. We have specialists that can help evaluate those. And we work with many different entities across the country. Across the country, we're advisor to the state of Colorado and the Department of Transportation there. Here locally, we're advisor to the state of Texas and the comptroller's office. We're also advisor to some smaller entities, as small as Amherst out in West Texas. In the El Paso region, we are only advisor to you all. That's a commitment we've made in order to not have conflicts of interest. And so you are the only entity we work with in that region. Moving along here, slide 6. So what is our role as we work with you? We have kind of 4 primary roles that we do. first and foremost, developing and executing plans of finance. And so that means when you all have a project, really quarterbacking a team of finance individuals, including bond counsel, including underwriters that are eventually brought in to help sell your bonds to the capital markets, working with staff, setting in place the timeline and ensuring that we have everything in order to have a successful sale and get the lowest cost of capital for you as possible. And something I touched on earlier, doing that within your current tax rate environment and levels that you all have prescribed to us to keep at certain levels, which is between 4 and 5 pennies, and I'll show you that here in a moment. So that is our primary work we do with you. In addition, we also evaluate each and every debt obligation that the county enters into. So not just the large capital financing transactions that may be a publicly offered bond deal, but we work with staff to also review. For instance, recently you entered into a state infrastructure bank loan to help finance some transportation corridor and infrastructure. We work to evaluate and structure USDA loans or your loan grant options, maybe with the Water Development Board. So we do a lot. We evaluate each and every one of those for suitability to make sure it fits within your debt profile, within the parameters that have been set, and also regulatorily and keeping in compliance. We also, where you usually see us on a quarterly basis is to update you on the current market environment, letting you know of any opportunities that may arise for refinancings, and also to give you some general updates on your tax base and opportunities perhaps for bond capacity. And lastly, we work with the auditor's office to help monitor and keep up to date with some of your continuing disclosure. So as you sell bonds or as you enter into debt obligations with different investors, you make commitments to provide them with annual information that includes your financial audits, it includes tax-based information, and several other detailed items that have to be posted on an annual basis to Emma, which is a online repository. Okay, moving along, slide 7. This is the rule made by the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board that regulates the work we do with you. And most importantly, what I want to point out is the fiduciary duty that we owe you. The fiduciary duty means we have to put the county's interest in front of our own and make sure that we are satisfying all the different requirements and parameters that you give us and not be focused on our own benefit from this. And so that guides us and is very important to the business that we do with you. I mentioned this, evaluating on slide 8, evaluating the suitability of any debt obligation. This is a newer requirement. We do have to paper the files and show through analysis and documentation that each and every debt obligation that you enter into meets financial situation and needs of the county, your objectives, tax status, risk tolerance, and other items that are listed here. So by engaging us, by us being engaged with you, it puts a lot of that onus and risk on us to also evaluate this with your staff. Okay, moving along to slide 10 here. This is a bit familiar to you all. We've gone through this. I want to spend a couple minutes on this here today, though. We've added some information. We've gone back further historically, and I want to point out in the middle column there, the INS rate. So that's the interest and sinking fund rate, which corresponds to your debt payments. And so we are charged with keeping this as level as possible. We've been asked to keep it in the 4 to 5 penny range. You'll see currently on the top line there in the INS rate, we are just below 4 pennies at 3.8 pennies. And you'll see that that's been declining and dropping since going back to 2013. And the reason for that is as you pay off debt, or you don't have as much debt to make payments to make in a particular year, it can go down. But also as the county grows. So that's that is the tax rate that's applied against your assessed valuation. And so the county has had tremendous growth here, very consistent growth that has helped to drive that down, in addition to pretty good and rapid payoff of your loans. So going back to 2003, still focused on that middle column, the INS rate, you'll see back in 2003 you were at 7.8 pennies. Which was being used to pay off your debt obligations, went down to a low mark in 2011 of 3.1 pennies, at which time you did issue some new money or some project financing in 2012, which increased the tax rate slightly up to 5.1 pennies. It has been since that time, since 2012, that you all have done a large capital financing. There's been some smaller 1 to 4 million type of financings that have been done, but no large ones since that time. This rate, keeping between 4 and 5 pennies, is very similar to your peers. When we look around the state of Texas, many of the counties are actually above that level, depending on the size. Once you start getting into the very large counties, you'll see it drop a little bit typically because the assessed valuation grows so much, it doesn't take as much to produce the same amount of money. Of course, it depends on the different services you provide, but 4 to 5 pennies is definitely on average, if not a tad below the rest of the state of Texas. Currently, like I said, you're right below that 4 penny mark, which also indicates you have capacity. You're starting to have that capacity to get back into some of the larger projects without affecting your taxpayers, without affecting the goals and parameters that you all have set with the 4 to 5 penny range. Looking over to the right-hand side, I do want to point out the debt per capita and debt to taxable assessed valuation here in the very right-hand row. This largely corresponds to your tax rate, but the $195 per capita there on the top line of the very right-hand side of the table up top is a very low level. You'll see here in another slide, Moody's and the rating agencies have indicated that is a very low mark, which is a credit positive for the county. Okay, I am on slide 11 now. Looks like we're matched up here. You've seen this one as well. This is a look at your debt portfolio. I'm not going to do a deep dive on this today. I did mention the last time you went out with a large project was in 2012. We've done quite a few bond refundings or refinancings over the years to save some interest cost and debt service cost. But as far as the new money, not any large projects. Down in the bottom right-hand table, I do want to point out this metric. So I have a box around the 2030 maturity, and really that's 10 years out from today. The rating agencies like to look at how much of your total principal or debt that you owe is paid off each year and by that 10-year mark. And they like to see that that 50% is paid off within 10 years. And if you have that paid off, they consider that a credit positive. If you're right around that mark or just past, it's credit neutral as far as the rating outlook and the notch that they give you when they assign a rating. And then if you get out beyond 14, 15 years, they may ding you a bit or give you a little bit of a negative for having slowly amortizing debt portfolio. So you're at 80%, very strong. This has been done intentionally for a couple of reasons, not only to lower your interest costs here, but also to provide for additional capacity here in these years that we are now in. And then there's a large drop off here in 23 that you'll see here momentarily that also has been done intentionally to help as you start to layer on for new projects, as you start to layer on the debt. It'll allow us to amortize on a shorter term basis, again, getting you a lower interest rate and cutting some of your interest cost. Okay, next slide, please. This too is something you've seen. This is just a bar chart of your total debt payments. We are, of course, in 2021 year right now, which is that first bar. You'll see there's quite a drop off in 23 that represents approximately $4 to $5 million drop off in your debt payments. And so as we work with you to try and maintain the tools in your toolbox, the ability to finance and take on projects, that is a big indication to us and staff that we need to get serious about some of your project financing. And reason being, as you all probably can imagine, once you drop your tax rate, once you lower it to a certain degree, it's really hard to come back and increase that again. And so that's why you have a bit of fluctuation as you pay off, and that's why we have these meetings to let you know when it's time to get back out. It's time to address some of your capital projects and maintain the tools in your toolbox for the financing services, financing plans, rather. The next big drop off that I talked about in 2033, really just 12 years out, you've dropped to nearly zero debt, presents a lot of flexibility for you and us as we look to accomplish some big projects. Typically what you'll see with some other counties and other municipal issuers is a level debt service structure all the way out, sometimes 20, even 30 years. And so it's really hard to layer on those big projects without, busting your tax rate, without having to increase more than the desired amount. So it's setting up beneficial here for you all and your taxpayers. Okay, moving on to slide 13. I want to point out a few metrics that the rating agencies like to look at that we also monitor here and help explain why the county is at a particular rating. So the county has a AA rating through all three agencies. You're at the level for Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. And a lot of that is built off of your strong financial performance and budgeting and your fund reserves. Those are the credit positives. Some of the constraints that we see, though, are your local demographics and the income levels and some of the per capita income that largely is out of your control. But nonetheless, the counties or the rating agencies have somewhat capped you at your current level because of that. So starting at the top, I've got tax-based size and the full value circled. In the first column, you'll see El Paso County is our detailed, highlighted entity. And we look at it compared against a AAA type credit there in the blue. We have AA in green, and then we have single A type credits in the metrics that they have there in the orange column. The county for the tax base falls right between the AA and AAA category. Really, it's going to take getting up to that $150, $160 million level for the valuation in order to get consideration for a AAA. Going down a little bit further to the general fund and the financial statistics for ratios, this is something you can control and something you all have done very well with. So this is the fund balance. I've got currently, these are based on 2019 audit, but you got about 92 million of fund balance, which equates to about 32%. You'll see that's a little bit lower than some of the AAAs and AAs, but for someone your size, it is very strong. And of course, much like your personal credit score, it helps improve the county's credit rating by having that at the levels it does. The rating agencies really like to see that. That's one of the metrics that they focus on. And it to them, it indicates if you have a downturn, if you have trouble with revenues in any one year, you have the ability to tap into that and take care of emergencies and utilize that as a rainy day fund. Moving down, I have direct net debt per capita circled. That's about 196 as measured by Moody's. You'll see compared to your peers, that is very low. So the others are in the $400 to up to $800 per capita range. So good job for you all keeping the debt burden down on your community there. Let's see, moving to, let's stay in that section, the bottom line, it's not circled, but debt service as a percentage of operating expenditures. Again, very low compared to your peers and many of the people or the issuers that are within the rating database for Moody's. So 6.4% compared to 8 to 14%. And then finally, there at the bottom in the last orange circle, I've circled the family income. Home value as well would be there and per capita income. But you'll see compared to just some of the other parts of the country, the data points and the income levels are a little bit below some of these other rating categories, which also is keeping you at that AA level. AA is a very strong rating. It is providing you with a very low cost of capital currently, and nothing to be, well, it's something you should be proud of. It definitely indicates, you know, some of the top levels of counties throughout the country and here in the state of Texas. Okay, moving along, slide 14. A little bit of rating information. I've put some quotes and highlighted some areas there that they've statements they make. Of course, each one of them puts out a full detailed report. I'll move along and let you all look at that at your leisure. But it highlights what I talked about, good fiscal performance, but somewhat of a weaker wealth and income profile. Okay, moving along to slide 16 here. These are some of the agencies and regulators that we work with as we, and you all do as well. Emma, as I referenced earlier, that's the repository in the online area where investors can go and find information about the county that we have a responsibility to, that the county has a responsibility to on an annual basis to post updated information and documents. Here in Texas, we have the Municipal Advisory Council of Texas that takes that repository a step further. It is required here in the state to post information not only to Emma, but to the MAC, as we call it. And it also has a lot of good data and additional data points for aggregation and ability to review and check the fiscal health of each entity here in the state. The Attorney General has some information that, or has some requirements that this be used and be posted to that database. FINRA, that's the higher up regulatory organization that controls the financial markets. The SEC, of course, most of us have heard of. Also a higher up U.S. federal agency that regulates. And then more particular is the MSRB, the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. And of course the IRS, since we are primarily issuing tax-exempt debt obligations, there are some requirements that the IRS has if you go out and borrow in that manner. Okay, slide 17. I have some of the math here. I'm not going to go into this one in great detail. Essentially, as a governmental issuer, you have the opportunity and privilege of borrowing at tax-free rates. And so the reason that's beneficial is because investors that buy your bonds can earn the interest earnings and capital gains and not have to pay taxes on that. And so effectively, if they compare that to a taxable type investment, they are getting a pretty strong return on their money. And so have a little bit of the background there that the advantage of being a governmental borrower and taking advantage of those tax exempt rates lowers your borrowing cost. But effectively, it's still a good investment for on the investment side. Okay, moving along, slide 18. We've detailed some of the different types of bonds that we go out with. And so when we evaluate your revenue streams and the different opportunities that you have to finance projects on the front end instead of accumulating cash is associated with these types of bonds. And so one of the primary tools there at the county level, of course, is your property tax revenues. If that is used, it equates to a general obligation bond. Certificates of obligation are the other tool that is primarily used at the county level in Texas. That allows you to use property tax and a different revenue stream, pair with it some system revenues to have a blended repayment stream if needed. And those are primarily for essential purpose projects. So not getting into, stadium type financing or another type of project that you would want to take in front of your voters. Beyond that, we have revenue bonds, net system revenue, which uses maybe a water stream, wastewater revenues, or some other type of revenue streams that may be available, sales tax revenues. We've got listed here, a little less frequent use would be the private activity bonds that can be used for some housing developments or maybe some economic development through industrial revenue bonds. On the right-hand side, we have some of the community development tools. As I mentioned on the front end, that may include public improvement districts, TIRs in Texas, the tax increment reinvestment zones, or some other type of specialty financing needs.
Brad, before you leave this slide, could you also just mention, is there any public improvement or do some of these community development tools, does it impact your credit rating or your debt to your ratios? if it's those special types of tools like a public improvement district or a TERS?
Sure, good question. The short answer is no, it does not impact the county's AA rating. That AA rating is associated with your general obligation bonds and certificates of obligation, basically the property tax backed type of bonds. These development districts usually have their own revenue stream associated with it, and so you're going to get a credit rating only for that particular district that it encompasses, and so it will be standalone. And depending on if it's developer driven or what is repaying that, the county is actually not at a whole lot of risk associated with that. It is based solely on the revenues of a new improvement district and the landowners within that. So if the developer owns the land to start, they are on the hook for paying those taxes or assessments to that specific district. So
I thank you so much. I mentioned that and wanted the court to note that because we have we've been approached with requests for both public improvement districts and TERS, and so wanted to make sure the court was aware as we head into those additional discussions in the future. Thank you, Brad.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to bring that up. And again, we have specialists here on our team in Texas that focus only on development districts and those type of bonds. And so if there was ever a need to evaluate a proposal from those developers for either one of those types, we do have those resources to help you out. Okay, so let's move to slide 20. Go through this just quickly. I know there's some new members of the court or some maybe that haven't been part of the process. I'm not going to a deep dive here, but wanted to focus on this a little bit. So we are your financial or your municipal advisor has been redefined here recently. You'll see those interchangeable names. The MSRB made some rules there, but we are the ones that help drive the process, working with you, working with staff to help put together the team, and really on the front end, develop a plan of finance. And so we do that by looking at your debt capacity and what's available to you. We're doing that here today. We work with staff and you all to establish what your financing goals are, whether it be for a particular project, whether it be to an essential purpose type project, or maybe it's a public improvement district type project that's only beneficial for a small group within the county. And then, of course, we go to the governing body to get ultimate approval with a prepared structure before we get out into the actual issuance process or issuing that debt or securities through the bond process. And so in addition to ourselves, you all are very familiar with your bond counsel. McCall Parkhurst plays another very big role in this. They work to write the opinions on the legality of the transactions, making sure that we are complying when we put these bonds together to both state and federal law issues. And then there will be a tax counsel, many times that's included with your bond counsel, that will write an opinion so that investors have the comfort that their capital gains or their interest earnings are not going to be subject to tax, to paying taxes on. In addition, there's usually disclosure counsel. Disclosure counsel puts together the offering document, working together with us in the county to make sure that we have included all the information that an investor may be interested in order to make their decision on buying the county's bonds or not. And then there's an underwriters council that's usually included in public offering deals as well. And that underwriters council, as it says, represents the underwriter, makes sure that they are covered on their due diligence process and through some of the blue sky state regulatory and securities laws. The underwriter we've mentioned, bond underwriter comes usually is engaged within 2 to sometimes 6 weeks before a bond sale. They're brought in to basically get your bonds out to market to find investors and to take on the risk associated with selling your bonds. So effectively, they are buying your bonds and then reselling to the capital markets. If they can't do that on a particular day, it is expected that they would buy those unsold balances that they couldn't get done on the pricing day for their own book or to move over the coming days. So that's the high-level framework of the financing teams when we get into a transaction. I will point out that the county has a underwriting pool, meaning that a few years back they went out to qualified underwriters, asked for proposals, and picked the best of the bunch, and we have I believe 5 or 6 approved underwriters that we can work with on any transaction. Moving along, slide 21. This is a little more detail on the types of financing tools and debt obligations that can be issued by the county here within the state of Texas. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Moving to 22 and 23, these are the other types. We pair these options to the financings that you are and projects that you're considering, and help pick the best one in order to cut costs, but also meet statutory requirements. Slide 24, just high level on debt obligations. Slide 25 is some background on debt service, how we structure your bonds, principal and interest with call dates. I have some slides further in the presentation I want to focus on, so you all please feel free to stop me if you have a specific question or follow up afterwards if you want to have a one-on-one question answered. Slide 26. Got an example of bond refundings. This is what I've mentioned a couple times. When you refinance a bond, it's actually called a bond refunding, and there's a couple of different ways we can do it. We always want to keep to the same final maturity, not trying to avoid extending your debt. There are some abilities to do that if you need to restructure for financial emergency situations, but we always try to keep your debt either at the same maturity when it was originally sold, or even shorten it from time to time. And so shortening it can provide quite a benefit. You'll see here in the blue boxes when you do a traditional refunding on the left, where you just match the existing final maturity, you get some strong savings on an annual basis. This can help your budgetary needs. It could provide some additional capacity because as you refund or refinance, you're saving that money on an annual basis. You can come and backfill or take on a new project by that capacity that's created when you lower the debt payment. Because as we've talked about, we've kept you below certain levels on a tax rate. So typically when we refinance, this is going to lower your annual payment and tax rate. Another way we can do it on the right-hand side is where we shorten the maturity, and you'll see down in the bottom of that right-hand example, there's 3 years that are actually removed from the bond structure. And by doing that, you cut out all of the interest costs in those years, and you're able to save more on a net present value basis. The results up top, that saves about $4.1 million on a net present value basis compared to the 2.1 option on the other, which is good to have those savings. You'll see on an annual basis, though, in the blue box, it doesn't create on the front end quite as much cash flow savings. So just wanted to point that out. Little different methods, and of course there's some little differences, additional differences that can always be added to each of these to suit your needs and your current or your debt portfolio. Okay, moving to 27. I've talked about the rating agencies a bit, so what we're getting into now is everything that goes into a new bond issuance. Investors do like to see at least one rating from one of the rating agencies on a bond issue. As you get into larger type debt issues and you get into a higher credit profile, some investors have requirements that they can't invest into a particular bond unless they have all 3 ratings at least AA and above. So if we want to keep the full investor universe open to us as we go to sell bonds, you'll oftentimes see that we have 2, sometimes even 3 ratings on each bond issue. There's a little bit more detail here on this page that describes the different levels. Of course, AAA is the highest quality, with AA right behind that. Page 28, we always put together an offering document so that investors, lenders can get familiar and know about the county and the repayment structure. That is what's done through what's called an official statement. And so a lot of work goes into this in order to make sure it's up to date. It discloses everything going on with the county, and it's imperative that that's accurate. That's the document that's heavily governed by the SEC, by FINRA, and so we do a lot of hard work to make sure that is accurate, concise, as we go out to the market. Okay, slide 29, please. Next. After you sell your bonds, you make agreements to the marketplace that you're going to update them on an annual basis of financial performance and your tax base. You also commit to let them know of any material events that may happen. And so it's very important to keep these in mind. We review these each and every time with staff, but these 16 events in the box on the right, we have 10 days to post this to the marketplace and let them know that the county may, had a rating change or even paid off bonds early is a requirement to be posted, as well as some of the negative type items if it occurs, if there's a delinquency in making your debt payments or pulling on a debt service reserve fund. Slide 30. I mentioned earlier that the IRS is one of the regulatory agencies that we have to satisfy when we issue tax-exempt bonds. They want to verify if you borrow tax-exempt money that you're not investing it to earn money off of. The only reason you can issue tax-exempt bonds is for capital projects. And so going into your infrastructure, There's a large variety of those, but when we talk about arbitrage, which is listed there in that top section, that's what they're looking for, to make sure you're not borrowing money, at 2 or 3% and going and investing it in a project that maybe, or not a project, but in an investment that maybe earns you 5 or 6%. You can't borrow that money in order to invest and make money. There's 3-year spending limitations. They want you to have your projects ready to go when you issue debt, and so we need to verify on the front end that we have a reasonable expectation to spend that money as it's borrowed. Okay, let's move to the next section and have probably 5, maybe 10 minutes left here, but this is an area I want to spend a little bit of time on and talk to you about capacity, what this means for the county and moving forward. I've set kind of the background and all the things that we look at with your tax base, where you currently stand. I've talked to you about the process for issuing bonds and deciding which product we have. And let's talk about some of the planning and getting ahead. So in the dark blue there in the bottom left of that chart, that is your current existing debt service or your current debt portfolio. The orange represents the amount of debt the county can handle at a 4.5% tax rate for the INS. And so each year that represents a little bit different amount. So as we discussed, we've dipped down actually to just below 4 cents here. And so when we look at 4.5 cents, even on this year, that represents $3 million, and I'm looking at the very left-hand bar, $3 million in orange in debt service that the county can afford and stay at that 4.5 cent tax rate, which is right in the middle of the 4 to 5 cents. And each year that tends to grow because your tax base grows a little bit. And so we've been very conservative in our growth rate here. This represents a 0.5, 0.5% growth rate each year. Provides this type of capacity. The last 10 years, the county has averaged closer to 3 or more % growth. So when you take a higher growth percentage rate, you've actually got even more capacity on an annual basis to be able to do this. And so I wanted to point this out. It is getting to that time where we've dipped below some of the levels that you've prescribed and asked us to maintain. And then here in the coming years, it gets even larger. We certainly want to get out and look at projects here in the next year, because in 23, there's quite a drop, and that's going to lower you even further. So on slide 33, I presented...
Brad,
yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Before you leave that, I know you're going to go through some scenarios, but if you go back to the previous slide, in 2023, when you see that 4.8 debt capacity, can you just share with the court an idea of what that equates to in total dollars? Just rough idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's 4.8 million on a annual basis that you can afford. That's not a $4.8 million project. If you're to do if you have 4.8 million per year to be able to pay towards a project, that actually equals to about a $65 million project that you could afford just with that amount. And so it's a lot of capacity on an annual basis. That is just the annual payment amount for the debt service that's available, not the project size. Yeah, 4.8 equates to about $65 million project if you're to make that payment over 20 years at a 4% interest rate. And as you see there, starting in 2033, it gets up to 22 million. You're talking capacity for the court of hundreds of millions if you're to use all that for financing. One thing that we want to do that we've been working with staff on over the years is not to have to issue 20-year debt. If we can get into the practice of shortening that to where we can get even potentially down to 15 for the smaller projects, it can really lower your total debt service or the interest cost on it. It replenishes your capacity and ability to continue to take on projects on an annual basis. And you have that capacity. So it's setting up nicely. If you get into the larger projects or if you get into a project, we're always trying to pair what we call the useful life of a project with the repayment. So if you go and build a brand new building in IRS or the county thinks it's going to last for 40 years, we don't necessarily want to have, that repaid in 5 years. That would all fall on your residents to repay. The people who live in your community for the next 5 years are paying for a building that may be used by others for 40 years. So there's always a balance of that. But just know that there is a tremendous amount of capacity coming, and there's actually unique opportunities here that the county has. When I say unique, compared to your peers in the rest of Texas, that we're going to be able to shorten the final maturity of these type of debt obligations. Any other question? Let me pause for a moment. Any other questions on this slide, or in general how the capacity works?
Commissioners, any questions? No, Brad, you can continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, on slide 33, you all saw this at the last presentation that we gave. We wanted to look at a few different of your projects, but also towards the bottom we have a table of your capacity. If we keep your tax rate at a certain level, what does that mean for the amount of projects that you could take on over the next few years and keep that level? So I know, none of these have been committed to, but some of the items that are on the list are potential county projects. The jail processing center, it's estimated at potentially at 70 million. The stormwater, there's approximately 100 million of needs for that. And that one's a little bit different. You'll see the asterisk there. I'll talk about that here in a moment on how that would be repaid. Animal Welfare Center, 15 million. Medical Examiner Facility. These are just a few examples of some of the items that are making their way to the project list from the departments that could be accomplished within your current capacity and keeping you within that range that's been prescribed. The stormwater, I want to point out that it's a little bit different because you all have already dedicated 1 penny from your M&O tax rate towards that. And Wally and the staff wanted me to make sure and point this out. If you're to take on large projects in the stormwater, we would recommend moving that penny from M&O to the INS side. And the reason to do that would be to lower your borrowing cost. On an M&O basis, the county would issue what's called more of a lease purchase or an annual appropriation type backed debt obligation that is appropriated from the budget each year in order to make those payments. Investors find it much stronger if you use that INS, which is dedicated solely to repayment of the debt. So do want you to know that would not, any project for the stormwater that the county decided to finance would not actually increase your current INS or your current total tax rate. It would simply be moved from one side to the other, and it would lower your borrowing costs on that pretty substantially. Okay, slide 34, please. This is just another graphical representation of the summary table that we provided. This is looking at the 4.5 cent INS tax rate, and it's just providing you some details. What this says is this year, this spring, you could go out with 25 million. Next year, you could go out with 75 million. In the following year, you could go out with 25 million, and you'd be able to stay at that 4.5 cent tax rate. You'll see in the chart on the top right, it still leaves those large step downs in order to provide for future capacity. And it's also, these are also done on a pretty short-term basis. These are 13, 16, and then a 20-year type structure, which again lowers that interest cost. So a lot of tools and options coming up depending on, of course, the pleasure of the court and the people and staff as we look to accomplishing these projects over the coming year and years. Next slide, please. This is a look at the stormwater. Again, this would be separate from your current INS, but that 1 penny can accomplish quite a bit. That 1 penny equates to about 4.4 million on its own, and I'm not suggesting that you use every bit of that for financing, but we wanted to just give you an estimate of where and what type of money that might produce. We're showing you here a $65 million project if done on a one-time basis. But what we do with many of our governments and clients is what we show on the following page, which is more of a cycle. So if we go to that next slide, and that instead of just issuing one-time large amount, if you don't have a really big project that needs that, sometimes it's better to take some smaller projects over time that can be recurring. So this looks at issuing 12.5 every 2 years in order to take on some pretty good sized projects, but it's more of a renewable type program. It doesn't use up the full penny of revenue that's been produced. Each one of these is about 600 to 700,000 of annual debt service on them. And so on the following slide, you'll see how these can be layered on so that it can become a renewable type program. We'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And so, again, each one of these represents a new bond issuance, and then the dotted orange line represents the debt service coverage that comes with the revenues available. So as your revenues increase, it produces a little more revenue when you take into account the 1 penny, and it allows you to layer some projects on every 2 or so years. Okay, that's last slide. I'd like to pause and certainly answer any questions. I do appreciate you all giving us some time here. I know you've been had so much on your plates recently, but be happy to answer any questions now that you may have or have a discussion.
Brad, that's indeed very comprehensive, obviously. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Betsy sort of place it more on the practical sense, like, having seen all of that, what concerns her, like what keeps her up at night, what should she be excited about, and and what are the things we need to think about in terms of projects, in terms of all of our initiatives. So if you could sort of give us a little debriefing, Betsy, from your perspective as to what you think all these numbers mean when it comes to a practical kind of situation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So first, I do think the one clear message is the county is, one of the Commissioners Court's goal has been to strengthen our financial health. And I think it's very clear that you've done a very good job doing that. I've sat and listened in other meetings and they don't get exactly the same message you're getting. You've done a very, very good job managing your debt, managing our debt portfolio, and being in a good financial position. There is also a point though where you can become too conservative. I keep a list of things that you all bring up that are capital, or that our departments bring up that are capital needs. This list now has over 40 topics or categories on it. This is everything from technology needs to replacing heavy equipment or adding heavy equipment to the county's inventory, to major projects such as stormwater, broadband, water and wastewater, parks. We have a parks master plan going on, improvements to facilities like the Coliseum. All of those are considered capital type projects. And those are the types of projects that we would need financing to be able to complete. What Brad has gone over, what Brad and Dan have presented, are that we are coming up on a time when we have capacity to do that without impacting taxpayers. You could hold the steady on our tax rate, and we could go through with some pretty significant projects. I'm meeting with each of you individually over the next few days, and one of the things I'm discussing in that meeting is being mindful of the fact that we're about to receive some American Rescue Plan funding. Some of that will help with some of these projects, but many of these projects don't qualify under American Rescue Plan that the court has been interested in. Some do. But for example, replacing roofs that are leaking, or improving bridges that are at a point in their life that we need to do something about them. Those kinds of projects don't qualify. And so what we're also facing is executing on an American Rescue Plan that has to be executed and completed pretty much within the next 3 years, plus facing an upcoming debt issuance. So we really need to work together to be prepared for that, and so that our departments are prepared to deliver on whatever the court does prioritize for this debt issuance, upcoming debt issuance. So I definitely think we're in good financial position. We have significant needs that the county and the court have identified, and we need to work together to be prepared to move forward on that.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Any commissioners, any comments? Commissioner Holguin, please.
I just have a quick question for Betsy. So on the slide that we saw with some of the big projects that we're looking at, there were 4 of them, and one of them was the animal welfare shelter, and the other one was stormwater, which is a big need, and then of course the yes, that one, the medical examiner facility. Mm-hmm. So all those 3 I know about, but what I don't know if I've heard yet any details on what the jail processing center project is. So I was just wondering what
Sure.
that is.
Can you take that slide down for me, Alexis? But thank you for pulling it up. So let me just also clarify, those were just examples that Brad pulled up. They are by no means a priority order of the court. And as a matter of fact, when I look through this list, there's some of these projects that we've discussed over several years, many years. The jail processing center concept is an intake center for part of our justice reform. It's something that came out in 2 studies as part of a couple studies. One was the Meadows study, which analyzed our jail processes, pretrial, intake, etc. And then the other one was we did a study with HOK, who is a firm that does both the they do an analysis of the condition of the building, of how it flows, the workflow. They did also a little bit of analysis on how our jail works, if you will. And they brought back several options to the court that ranged from anywhere in like 60 million up to 180 million or more of redoing the downtown detention center. Was the full-blown like $180 million package. The court has not picked any of those options, and we have not narrowed in on any of those options. That was just used for an example today, but that is a conversation we need to have to see if it is a priority. We would tell you that an intake center, some sort of an intake center is needed, and it might be combined with some other improvements to the downtown jail, such as moving our headquarters downtown where they have more access to resources they need, offices for the sheriff. But those are all things that we need to continue to work through and bring back for a final decision.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Excellent, Betsy.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Well, once again, we thank you. Like I said, very comprehensive and very valuable, and all of these leading into our strategic planning. All of this is our foundations, and be able to look at strategies based on the numbers. So we thank you for doing that and being here with us today.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Caesar?
That completes all the items on our agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, item number 3 is public comment. Standard item that we have. We have taken all our public comment on all our other items, so we'll take no action on item number 3. And now this concludes all the items on our agenda, Judge.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Betsy, your team, Miguel, Alexis, everyone. Thank you for all the support on this special session. Commissioners, thank you. Have a great weekend going forward, and thank you for everything. Appreciate it. Good luck on everything.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. This concludes today's meeting at 12:30 p.m.